Okay, there we go. Okay, welcome to the Open Midrash discussion. This is our second one during this feast. We've had several feasts where we never got one in, so this is kind of good. We got two of them in this time. All right, a couple of quick things. So, Katan A and Gadol B should be, I think, at the Ark, or no, whatever they're doing. There are activities that are tonight. Just remember that their activities are going on, and so that you can have them doing their activities. I don't know where everybody is. I forgot. Okay. Now, I have a note about a lost wedding band. Either one was found or one is missing. So if you found one, get it to the lost and found. Let one of us have a hold of it so we can get it to the right person. If you've lost one, then let us know. I don't know what this is, but I found it on my podium. So somebody either lost one or found one. So we'll figure that out. Quick announcements. So first of all, Sukkot is over. But Shemini Atzeret has started. Yay! Fantastic. How could we be done already? One more day. Amazing. It went so quick. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a discussion tonight. Just a reminder, some of the announcements here. Tomorrow we do have the YM2I program for the children, the presentations. That will be in the morning at 9. And then, of course, services in the afternoon. And then after supper, after the sun goes down, it's clean up and start packing. Okay, because everybody needs to be out of here Tuesday morning by 10. Just a reminder. All right, thank you. If you have any balances due, you'll have to take care of that from your home. You have to send us a check or PayPal us because we are into the holy day here. And so no more business to be done. If you do have an offering to make, we do have the box in the back, and we'll have it there, especially if anybody wants to put in any excess second tithe. If you don't have it with you, but you have it in a bank account somewhere and you want to send it, you could always do that next week. And just remember that we're starting fresh as of Tuesday. Okay? All right, I think that should cover for announcements. We still might need some help. I don't know. I didn't check the back with volunteers to help with some of the driving-related issues for shuttling people to and from the airport. If you need a ride to the airport, let us know in the back. And if you can help with that, also let us know in the back. Okay? Volunteer? All right, so that covers that stuff. All right, so for the way we do this Open Midrash discussion, well, first of all, before we get started, let me just remind everyone that was at the class earlier today. I forgot to tell you one thing, all right? That last bit of stuff that I gave you to do, I want to make sure you understand it absolutely 100% works. What's not clear whether or not is that whether or not you're going to do it, okay? Those techniques I gave you work all the time, every time, but you have to do it, okay? And it doesn't happen after a week. You need weeks and weeks. You got to build some time into it. Because I've had somebody, when I first went to give it to them one time, someone said to me, "Oh, I've tried all that before. It doesn't work." Hold on. Tell me what that looked like. What do you mean you did this before? Well, I tried it for a week or whatever it was. I said, it doesn't work that way. It's going to take you a few months. It's a commitment over, look, is it not worth a few months to finally straighten out some things you've been dealing with for a few 40, 50, 30 years, whatever it's been? Okay? Just want to remind you that stuff does work. If you're watching the Midrash going, what is he talking about? Okay, don't ask Robin, Kurt that. They're not going to. Refer to today's afternoon, Up to the Challenge, Part 2, that we did from the Sunday session from today. Okay, from the 20th. So you look on the YouTube, look for the Sunday, the 20th session, and you should be able to do that. All right. Okay, if you have a comment or a question or something midrashic that you want me to ask, deal with, and we could deal with it as a group, come up, sit in the front. Okay? If you're on the live stream, please be nice to these wonderful guys who, listen, they've got the hardest job actually here. They've got to deal with the live stream. Which, for some of you guys on live stream, you make it very easy and it's great. Some of the newer people or some other people don't really understand our processes yet. That's okay. They'll learn, hopefully, eventually. But, you guys on live stream, you have to learn to follow instruction. If something's going on and one of the guys posts a teaching for it, then you don't need to keep asking about the question. Just refer to the teaching, okay? Because that's kind of what happened last time. It's just let them post that. If I'm talking about a subject that you want more detail on that I didn't cover, tithing, Sabbath, whatever, fear of Yahweh, it doesn't matter, something I've taught, they'll give you a link for it. And you can click on the link, you can refer to the link. Okay. I don't see a whole lot of people wanting questions. Okay, this session was quick. Everybody have a good night. All right, Rob, go ahead.
All right, from Andy. So his question, please can you fully explain what the third tithe is all about, please, as we are very confused.
It's simply another way for me to get money out of your pocket. I got a new car payment, I'm kidding. Okay, so look, there are 3 different tithes, and they're very logical when you think about it, okay? The first one is to do the work that Yahweh's doing. And it's meant for you to appreciate his blessings. It's meant for you to put him first in your life and that kind of thing. The second one is for you. It's to assure that you have what you need to rejoice at his feasts, okay? And the third one is to take care of those less fortunate, okay? Those that wouldn't be able to necessarily have first or second tithe. Those that would be gleaning the corners of fields. Those that would be in need of benevolence. And by the way, they're not always the same people all the time. Sometimes they find their way out of being poor. Sometimes some of you that are doing well find yourself in the poorhouse, so to speak. And you have those moments. So your company goes out of business, the company downsizes, something goes on, you have trouble finding work for a period of time, you could be that person for a little bit. Okay? So the third tithe is to provide for the widows, for the orphans, for the less fortunate. I mean, they use specifics when they say things like the widows and orphans, but it's more than that. Okay? It's for those that need help, that can't have basic needs. Okay? For example, they can't pay for food or shelter, or they've got a challenge where they need a vehicle that works, but they can't fix it because things just happen. Okay, so generally speaking, though, there are people that totally mismanage their money, and they become what we call, benevolence black holes. You can throw whatever you want in it, it won't fix anything. Not ultimately, they're going to forever need. And so let the ministry handle this. I want to say we're professional, but we've been taken for enough rides that we're better at spotting them probably than you. Okay? Because some of you know that you've been taken a few times. And the ministry's not immune to that, but, we've made enough mistakes over the years that we've kind of know what we're looking for a little bit differently. And we want to help make sure that we're not enabling anybody. But we do want to help people if they need help, okay? And if you talk to anybody who's in the staff, here's a good point that we need to make. I think it's a very good time for that. Staff does not necessarily equal leadership. Okay? Because people will say, well, isn't so-and-so in the leadership? No. Our leadership has very few people in it. They have leadership authority in their area. So from that point of view, they lead an area, but they're not leadership like you think about as in ministry. Okay? The leadership in the ministry that we have here has myself, has Rabbi Tom, and has Kurt Meyer. That's your leadership. Those are your anointed, appointed, so to speak. We have 2 rabbis and a shamash. That's your leadership. You also have Rebbitzin Joanna, my wife. Okay, so you got 2 Rebbitzins. All right? And so that's your leadership. Now, you do have people that have staff authority. David Hayes is operations director, right? Stacia Hayes is our accountant. She's the feast coordinator. We have Manny Huerta who helps with the media stuff, all right? Okay, so that's his area. He does media. Everybody's got a certain area that they have certain authority over, but when we talk about leadership, I think mostly they're talking about going to for counsel, for different things. Don't go to them for that. You put them in a very difficult position. Okay? And they will probably look at you and say, I'm not leadership. You need to go to Rabbi Steve or Rabbi Tom or whatever, okay? All right. So when I say let leadership answer something, that's what I'm talking about, okay? Now, in the social media, Manny does have permission to answer questions, and almost always he'll redirect you to a teaching or to something else that I've said or whatever. So, and he's very good at that, okay? Excellent job from Manny. All right. and he laughs the hardest at all my sarcasm. So that, okay? So, and manages to stay up latest when we're out there in the parking lot at 3 a.m, So, 4:40. Yeah, 4:40. That's our new record. And at 4:40, I looked at him and Michelle and said, "You want breakfast? We're at the diner." We stood in a parking lot for over 2 hours, because we probably didn't leave until about almost 2. When it's open, it's not like Five Guys where they close at 11 and we go outside for 2 hours. I mean, it was open, but we thought we were leaving. We just kept talking and talking and talking. So let's go back in and have breakfast. We should have, too. We really should have. It is the best talks. You want the best talks? They happen between like midnight and 4. That's when I'm awake. So then it works out better. All right. So I just thought that'd be a good way to kind of throw that out there. So when it comes to things like this question on third tithing, for the person who asked that question, these things are explained in a teaching that they're probably sending you links for on tithing. Okay, I forget how many parts it was, but there's a teaching that covers it, okay? All right, next question.
From Sean and Anna Sarah Richard, can the second tithe be used for the cost involved in a circumcision?
I would say yes, because you need it for a feast. Okay? So let me bring that up at the next leader meeting just to kind of run it by the guys and everything, but I would say yes. No, it's okay. I'll repeat what he said in this case. He said, wouldn't the first tithe be for that? No, that first tithe does not belong to you for anything. That goes to the Levite, period. Okay? But your second tithe, which is feast related, well, if you need to be circumcised to keep the feast, I think we could justify the need to be able to afford to do that. Yes, I would say you should be able to do that. Okay? So does that help? Okay? Because I know some of you really want to do it. You haven't done it, but it's hard to get enough money to do it because as an adult, it's not cheap. Okay? And not as well, it's not always easy to find someone to do it. Okay, so I think that's a good answer, yes. First tithe, no. Okay? You need to be able to make the declaration you have not touched that money. All right.
All right. Andy's got a follow-up to that. So, Rabbi, thank you for answering. Can I ask, we're in the UK, so the third tithe should be used for the UK needs, or how does it work?
Okay. Now we're starting to get into more of the complications of being international, okay? Okay, all of your first and third, remember your second is for you. When I say for you, meaning to use in the context of feasts, it's not just for you to do whatever you want with, but it's meant for you. So you're not sending that anywhere. All of your tithes should go to the local place that you're being fed. Now, if you don't have a local place and we are virtually being that place, you would send it here. That makes sense. Okay? If you found a congregation or one was started in your area that you felt was viable and you were able to go, then you should put it there. All right? Now, you can still put offerings here if you feel like you want to, because that's something you can do. You're blessed, but that's an offering. The tithing is for the support of the place that you are that's serving your needs. If I am your rabbi, if I'm the one that's serving your needs, that you counsel with and everything else, this is where it should go. Okay? But if you find a local congregation and it's a viable congregation and it's meeting those needs and you're able to do those things, or if we start one in your area, that one would receive the. So, for example, Gary Flint and the group in Ohio, they put their tithes locally. Okay, Raymond in Wisconsin, they put their tithes locally, okay? Tony Hughes in Texas, locally. The guys out in Utah, they do it locally, all right? So all of the groups that they have, they would do it locally, but then a lot of them, what they'll do is they'll take a tithe of that tithe and they'll send it here to help support the bigger ministry. And by the way, that's something they decided to do. That was nothing I imposed. Just so you understand, we do something very interesting. We offer unilateral stuff. We'll do this, you don't have to do anything back. We ask very simply two things of our leadership. Maybe that's a good question to kind of answer that nobody really asked it, but what does it take to be in leadership in our organization? Because we do have an MTY Leadership Council meeting once a month. And in order to be in there, you have to be signing off that you will do everything I say and say yes to everything. Come on, wake up. You guys are like, listening, going, wait a minute, that was a joke. that food from dinner is still sitting, right? You guys are like, I can't believe I ate. Remember that commercial? Can't believe I ate the whole thing. All you young people, that was an Alka-Seltzer commercial. All right. So to be part of our leadership, we require just two simple things. Okay? That way it's not a yes man thing. It's not me handpicking people. You got to be doing two things. One is you have to be leading something. There's a shock. To be in the leadership meeting, you have to actually be leading something. By something, I mean it can be a congregation, it can be an assembly, it could be a small home fellowship. Okay? And then secondly, it has to be under the MTOI umbrella, which means that you are participating in what we do. You come to our Tuesday night studies as much as you can. Your group, if it can, comes to these kind of events like this, like Sukkot. You participate with us. You use the live stream. Some of the groups do, some don't. The ones that don't have their own teachers, but they still are affiliated with us. Okay? So to be in leadership, it's not very complicated. You need to be leading something and under this umbrella, which means that you participate in stuff. Okay? And then our leadership meets once a month, probably for about 3 hours. Okay? 2 to 3 hours. And we talk about what's going on in our local areas. We talk about the bigger picture of things. You know, it's one of those iron sharpen iron thing where if somebody in a local congregation who's leading, who's new at leadership, is trying to learn it and says, the situation came up and I didn't know what to do, what should I do? So then he has an abundance of counsel. There's over 20 of us in the council. Or he may say, this situation came up and this is what I did. Was that the right thing to do? Because maybe the decision had to be made quickly before there was another meeting. Okay, was that the right thing to do? Of course, the right thing to do, if you really didn't know what to do, would have been to make a phone call. Because all of you in the leadership have my cell phone. So just a reminder that that would be the right thing to do, okay? Before making a tough decision that you're not sure of, you probably should get help. But it's a great way to get that kind of information, for iron to sharpen iron, okay? So anyway, so that's what we do. So, like the circumcision question with the second tithe, I'll bring it up before them. Now, bear in mind, it's not a democratic council like that, and nobody gets a vote. We don't do that. That's not vertical. The burden of responsibility on all decisions is mine. However, it's also my responsibility to listen to everyone, hear their positions and points, and then once I have a decision to make, it's my job to help bring consensus. In other words, to help them understand why that decision at this time makes the most sense, why it's the right decision. And we never really have a problem. I don't think we've ever had a heated discussion, except at the very first meeting, and the two guys that had the biggest problem left, okay? And that was over whether or not you have to teach the Torah portion on Shabbat. Okay, that was the issue. And I said, my decision that they were mad about was I said, I'll leave that to the local group. And for some reason that wasn't. So in case you're wondering, I wonder what they were mad about. They were mad because I let groups do what they want to do. I gave them some freedom of choice. Some groups like ours do a topical teaching. We do the Torah portion on Tuesday. Other groups follow the Jewish tradition of doing the Torah portion on Saturday. Nothing wrong with either of those. There's no scripture requirement to do the Torah portion. Okay? Oh, but what about that verse where Yeshua stood up and he read from Isaiah? Okay, there are some fairly short Haftorah portions, which is the prophets. I don't know any that are a half a verse or 1.5 verses, whatever that is. I mean, it's not, he doesn't even read a whole, he leaves a part of a verse off even. There's no portion that has that small. Because it's saying that proves they were doing the Torah cycle. No, it doesn't. Okay? And even if they were, that makes it a tradition, not a commandment. Because we're told on every Shabbat they're going to hear Moses preached. When you come on Shabbat, do you get to hear Moses preached? Yes. Well, there you go. All right? We get Moses in there every time. Anytime we're talking about Torah, we're getting Moses preached. Okay? And for Mandy, that's a Torah. He likes the way I say that. All right, anyway. Next question.
Okay, from Jordan Thompson, says, Rabbi, is there an age in which males need to be circumcised to be able to participate in the Passover? Says, we did not have our son circumcised, and he's 2 now.
Okay, so let me tell you how I've answered this in the past, and I'm going to try to be consistent with it, okay? If you've not had it done on the 8th day, and by the way, I know people personally that didn't have it done on the 8th day and then were getting older and they actually had some physical issues because they didn't have the circumcision. I know other people that end up with physical issues, whatever, that can happen, but I mean, these things can happen. If you're going to not worry about that, let's talk about it from a covenanting point of view. You already missed the 8th day. The older the child gets, the more they are going to know what you're doing. My son had no idea, nor did I, on my 8th day or his 8th day. All right? Has no memory of it. There's nothing. You're 8 days old. Okay? So, to be covenanted with circumcision, that is a commitment of the parents to raise the child a certain way. The child's still going to have to make his own covenanting relationship. Because just because he's circumcised, as Paul rightly points out, it doesn't avail anything unless you do something with it. Okay? Because he said, just because you're circumcised, if you do nothing with it, you might as well be like the uncircumcised. It's reckoned to you as if you're uncircumcised. You're counted as the uncircumcised. So I would say that the child can do it at any point if the child wants to. That we have a few teenagers up in Canada and a few in South Africa and other places in Australia that have chosen that they wanted to get it done. Okay, and hey, that's great. But I would say that the need to have it done would be 20. Okay? If you didn't catch that early window, that doesn't mean you can't do it anywhere along the way. Now, as far as Passover is concerned, it is my guess and understanding, because I'm having to make a Deuteronomy 17 sort of judgment. It's my opinion that at Passover, the children are covered by the parent. If the parent is circumcised, the children can come. And so that's not a problem. But of course, once they get to be 20, now they're responsible for themselves. Okay, they're no longer officially understood as being just under your covering. Now they got their own problems that they've got to stand forth for themselves. They're counted to go to army, then they're counted to go to Passover. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense for everyone. What else you got? Okay?
Yeah, like in our Deuteronomy readings, 7:3, what had to do with once you're in a covenant, marry in the covenant, make sure your daughter marries somebody who's covenanted. The answer was basically not in the camp. We're not under Levitical authority to make judgments and things. That it's basically up to every individual. Would you say things like this, or if you lose possessions, paying double? If you steal, having to do 4 times, things along those lines, we're all responsible to make sure we do it ourselves to be in compliant with the Torah. There's no one making us do it. We do it willingly.
I would say that would be correct. Okay, first of all, let me clarify on the daughter thing. You as the father, you can have whatever rules you want. Of course, they get old enough, they're going to do whatever they want, because then you lose your authority, because they're going to be old enough to just move out and do what they want. So, but understand that these things to be enforced would have to be enforced only in the land in the context of the cohesive corporate nation of Israel. Okay? And so, yes. Now, as far as the things like if you don't return something or if this happens or that happens and it says to pay back double or to pay back a fifth or whatever it is to do, you can choose to do those things. Again, it's in the context of that community. So, apply it as best you understand it in that case. Of course, the right thing to do is to comply with. If you borrow, get it back. Do things right in the first place. If you lose it, break it, replace it. All right? There are simple things that you can do. Okay.
Yeah, and then the Deuteronomy 14:21, where it says we can sell defiled meat to uncoveted people. I was wondering if you could go into how that works in. Because for us to eat it would be a sin. We're not supposed to cause others to sin. Love thy brother as thyself. I wouldn't do it to myself. Why would I do it to another? I had a hard time how to place that in there. And if there's a bigger meaning to it, not just the defiled meat, that applies to anything else under those contexts.
Okay. These are good questions because they're about I like when we deal with questions that actually have to do with our walk. So they're very good questions. Okay, so the answer to that I would give is this. When you're dealing with doing things that you wouldn't want your someone else to deal with, you have to remember the inside, the outside, the camp understanding. Okay, when the Gentiles who are not covenanted to do something, it's not sin. It's what it is. If Gentiles commit adultery, it's not sin. If murder is not sin, it's not that it's not against, all those. Sin is defined by the law in covenant. Sin is a specific thing that tells you it goes against and affects your relationship with your Creator. They're already not in that relationship. Okay? So it doesn't affect that relationship. They're already not in it. Now, murder's still hideous. Adultery's still hideous. Most nations in the secular world are against these things. All right? But when it talks about they are not required the same way we are required. Now, it says the law is the same for us and the ger. The ger is a special type of stranger, so to speak, one that is looking to and considering and participating in the I don't know, for lack of a word, conversion. Because we don't actually do like an official thing, like a process, but they're wanting to become Israel. So there's one law for those that are in and those that are wanting to understand what it means to be in. So they're searching and trying and hanging out with Israel in the process of deciding to convert, so to speak, or to commit to being a citizen. I think it's I hate the word conversion, okay? But it's the idea of changing citizenship. But those that are the other type of strangers, which is everybody else, the Gentiles, they're basically on their own. They are out, he says in let me read it to you, in Ephesians, I think. Just want to kind of make sure that you are understanding this. We've read this so many times, we'll read it again. Okay, I think we're going to be in Ephesians 2. All right. So just remember this. I gotta get the right height on this thing. I'll pull it here for a second. If you look at verse 12, okay? Or verse 11. Therefore remember that you, once Gentiles, okay, this is telling you what the status of a Gentile is. In the flesh, who are called the uncircumcision by what is called circumcision. In other words, the Jews called you uncircumcised because you were born not in covenant, made in flesh by hands, that at that time you were without Messiah. So without Messiah means without the truth, without the Torah, without the light, without all that stuff. You were without Messiah, excluded from the citizenship of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no expectation and without Elohim in the world. Therefore, you can eat anything. Therefore, you can do anything, because he's not working with them at this point. It's not like he's giving them permission to, and that it's good to do. He's just not concerned about it. They're already not in the standing where this has any ramifications, so to speak. So you don't need to worry about the Gentiles and all the things that they're doing. Okay? They're doing the things that they're doing. And so that's why you can sell them the defiled meat. Does that answer your question? Okay. Okay, who's next? Okay, Regina?
I have a comment. Well, I'm going to read it because I had to write it down. I came to Sukkot with the desire for knowledge and understanding and community. I failed myself the first couple days here. I wore my victim bubble. I'm not good enough. My bubble was pushed and poked at. When it was, I was self-centered and thought, these people don't know me, and how can they help me? I only had me, I thought about. Now, how my actions were affecting, not how my actions were affecting the others. I had two ladies on two separate occasions approach me to see if I needed to talk. They could obviously tell I needed someone to talk to. I was rude in being a victim and just walked off. I would like to apologize to you both. I should have never been so rude to those trying to help me. That is what I came here for. I'm embarrassed for my actions, but I know now and forgive myself for the lack of knowledge and understanding that I have had. Over the past couple of days, the community has spoken, I have listened, and I have had my eyes and my ears open to who I have been, and it is not who I want to be. I have used the line, "It's not fair," in my victimhood, and I now realize every time I did, I was standing in line to jump on that real fun ride, the tilt-a-whirl. That's not fun. You stay on it long enough, you get sick, but you jump back in line to get right back on, even though you know the same outcome will happen. I am so blessed by Yah to have several community members to talk with and listen to. I want to thank you, our Creator, I want to thank our Creator for you all being placed in my life. To Manny, thank you for being there to listen and advise. Your words strengthened me to open up and be assertive. If I had not, I would not have met and made friends here. A very special thank you to Trish, Laura, Kathy, Shaquez, Deirdre, Norma, and Tony. You ladies are amazing. I love you all so very much. He has allowed you to affect me in the most positive way. I'm not sure which one of you took Rabbi Tom's walking stick and struck my bubble and popped it, but thank you. It really was a good blow. Knocked me right upside the victim head and knocked it out of me. All blessings, honor, and glory to the Most High El, Creator of all, for allowing me this opportunity for growth.
Amen. 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 See, now that's what it's all about. Okay? And I got to tell you something. Regina and I talked towards the beginning of all this. She's a different person now. Okay? This has been a growth in just a short window of time. Okay? And it's not because of what I did in talking to her. It's because of what you people did. This is what community can do for you. Good job on all of you. Well done. There's a big lesson, though. I hope you heard it. Two things, actually. One is, don't get caught up playing the victim. I know people hate hearing that because you have family members say, you just like to play the victim. Well, no, you got to recognize it in yourself. That's when she made progress. She saw that she was doing it. But the second big thing is that help had always been available, and she rejected it. How much help are you rejecting? How many of you need to talk to me, but you're still afraid to do it? You understand what I'm saying? There's help available, but you're not taking advantage of that. You have all these excuses and all these reasons and all this junk, but you see, she's giving you a testimony, but when she actually got out there, got popped in the victim head, she found some sisters that love her and were there to kind of make a difference. And now listen to how the person I talked to a couple of days ago couldn't have got up in front of that microphone. Okay? Very proud of you. Great job. Okay, next question or comment or testimony letter. whatever you got. Okay, if the light's on, it means it's muted, so just push that yellow button.
Test.
Yep.
Okay. I don't have a letter, but can I ask two questions since I've never been up here in my whole life?
We can, only this one time though.
Okay.
Of course, Janet's laughing. She comes usually with 5, 6, and you're asking for 2. All right, go ahead.
My first question is about Isaiah 57:1.
Okay. What's the question?
It says, "The righteous one has perished, and no one takes it to heart, and committed men are taken away, while no one understands that the righteous one is taken away from the presence of evil. He enters into peace. They who walk in integrity rest on their beds." When my 15-year-old son passed away 15 months ago, I came across this. Does Yah do that? Would he take someone from potential evil?
Again, I'd have to go and wrap my brain back into the context of what Isaiah 57 is dealing with and what the message is, because sometimes we have to be very careful of just looking at it from the literal point of view. It's a message here, because the next thing talks about, the come here, you sons of the sorcerers, you offspring of the adulterer and the whore, against whom will you... So there's a lot going on in here that's not about individuals as much as about things that have to do with the nation. Remember, he's a prophet to the nation of Israel, right? Okay, so Isaiah is prophesying here. Now, as this is going on, all right, and these lessons go on, it's easy for us to read into it or try to into it because you dealt with something that makes us so upset. It hurts our hearts because it makes no sense. How do these things happen? Okay, and I talked about it earlier today, how there are a few people like you, or one of them, who have lost a child, and you don't expect to lose a teenager. Okay, especially in an accidental way, and it's not like they got sick or this or that. I mean, they just, and so I think that, again, it's more likely that it falls into the time and chance and things just do happen. Bad things do happen to good people, okay? Because all of us would like to be taken away from the evil world that we're in. So I don't know that he was just being protected from that. I don't want to be stepping outside of my pay grade to really understand why it was your son at that moment and why these things happen. For any of you that go through these things, I don't want to think that I can figure that out, because if I'm wrong, that could really be hurtful to you, to give you hope to where there's no hope, or understanding where that's wrong. It's just one of those things where you take comfort that there is a plan, and that, yes, it's painful in this fleshly life, but ultimately, I hate to say it this way, it's not relevant, meaning he'll have that time, you'll have that time, you'll see each other again. Those things are only because we're still flesh and we are mortal. We have a limited life, okay? So we have that hope to get excited about. Mm-hmm. But why it happened, the why thing is really tough, okay? Why? How many of you, I don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you were raised in a broken home? Some of you were raised with awful parents or drug addicts or this thing or violence or only single mom, single dad. Why? Why did that have to happen to me? A lot of people don't have that. A lot of people do have that. The why question will torture you if you want to focus on it, okay? So my encouragement is we can search and look at these things. I wouldn't do that for trying to get the why. Find comfort that it's okay. Have peace that it's okay, as opposed to worrying about why. All right? Because it's easy to get angry at our Creator, angry at different people, want to point a finger, and then if that's not working for you, you say, well, let me find a good reason. And so this is looking for a good reason. So he's in a better situation, that he was saved from these evil, he's pulled out of there. I can't say that or not. I don't think Isaiah necessarily is speaking of that specific thing. All I know is that these young ones, I don't think they've had their chance. Because they're not even 20. 20 is really the age of majority. They do get, in my opinion, that opportunity in the millennium. And you walk this out, you'll be there and you'll see them. And that's the good news. Mm-hmm. Okay? Let's hold on to that.
Yeah.
Amen?
Amen. Thank you. My next question was, what does the Bible say about laying on of hands when you pray for someone? Is that for us or no? It's
really for the leadership to do. When it talks about the laying on of hands, one of our members came up with an understanding that I like very much, actually. It's almost more from the point of view of not, we think of laying on of hands just of anointing with oil. You know the phrase, and it's always used in the negative, but maybe we can think of it in the positive. When you say something, when I lay my hands on you, if I get maybe it has to do with coming under authority. You go to the elders and let them lay hands on you so they can mold you and you can be submitted to that, and then you might find healing. A lot of you have felt that experience. When you finally came under authority, things changed. You started finding answers. There was emotional healing, some physical healing, whatever it is. So there very well could be a connection with that. Okay? So first and foremost, it's talking about it coming from the eldership. Secondly, it may have to do with authority more than it has to do with anything to do with the oils and everything else. okay? The idea of laying hands on you. It's clearly, to me, an idiomatic phrase. We just got to figure out what it means. Because even when we talk about anointing, we're not talking about like laying hands on you, you know. I lay my hands on you, or just laying them on, or what does it mean? We're guessing. It's a phrase that was understood by the people at the time that we're guessing. Okay, I don't know if that helps at all, but, okay? But I know the person that thought of it that way and shared it with me had found that she had had that experience with the laying on of hands of authority, allowing leadership to mold, guide, and have their authority. Because like when I lay my hands on you, you'll start doing things the right way, and I'll change your life around, young man, young woman, you know, a parent to a kid. But when you voluntarily come into that, maybe that's part of the answer. Okay, next question. Okay, James again. You're just trying to confuse us. Once without the jacket on, once with the jacket on, so we don't know it's the same guy. With the hat, not with the hat. I see. I still figured you out, though. All right, go ahead.
I do have one question, but first I'd like to give this little testimony. Something I keep hearing that keeps coming up is people wondering why things happen to them when they're growing up. And one of the things that we believe is everything either is caused or is allowed by Yahweh for his purpose, his glory.
Yep.
We may not always know the reason because sometimes it's for a bystander, someone you'll meet later you can relate to. It could have just been chance and consequence that you got pulled into someone else. Sometimes it's to strengthen you for later. I was someone who was very picked on and beat up every day going to school to the point I dropped out, got a GED, and moved on.
Yep.
But it taught me how to stop caring what other people think of me, not fitting in with everybody else. Just do what I think is right. There's struggles that I got into that caused me to reach out to Yahweh that got me here. Things that would be very hard to even share because they're shameful. But everything happens for a reason.
Amen.
And at that, I forgot my question.
That's okay. Put on the hat next time, ask the question, you know. Okay. The thing is that it takes time for us sometimes to see why he allowed something. You might not be able to see it yet. You know, we went through, in our personal life and with our ministry, we went through a journey. You know, we'd been doing great with our ministry back in 2000, 2001, 2002. We get to 2003, and some stuff came up. We didn't know how to handle it, what to do with it, and so we ended up on a journey that took us 7 years. And that journey, though, prepared me for being able to now help anybody else going on that journey. And I'll explain it just briefly and so you understand. You know, there are friends of yours that will come to a place where, because of the ease of access to research and scriptures and translations, who will discover the book's been manhandled? Okay? And that can be greatly disturbing. It can be disturbing enough that if you can't figure out, and often it starts with the Brit Chadashah, the New Testament, we see a lot of things in there that make us go, what? You may not know what I'm talking about. You don't need to know at this point. Okay? So what happened was we were growing in ministry. We're actually just at the beginnings of becoming what you see now. Just at the beginnings of people wanting to affiliate with us. We had 3 congregations in Tennessee. Those I was actually running all 3 of them. That was crazy. Okay? I would do services Friday night in Chattanooga, Saturday morning in Knoxville, and Saturday afternoon in Nashville. I gave the same sermon 3 times in a row with no notes, so they were all different. They weren't really, but they were different enough. So that at least my wife wasn't bored, because I would have slightly different things that I would see or use during the teaching. The message was the same. But we drove a lot. We covered a lot of ground. It was exhausting. But we were really growing as a ministry, because the teachings were the same teachings you guys are hearing. We did Fear of Yahweh and Identity of Israel and, you know, Search for the Doctrine of Grace, although it came out very different back then. Beware false prophets. A lot of this stuff was all older stuff. You know, ask Uncle Bob, ask Robin. They were there. But now, that being said, we were then eventually at a group as guest speakers. We were very honored as guests, and people started doing this Q&A type of thing, and they started asking questions I couldn't answer about issues with the book. And the more I dug into it, the more he allowed me to say, there are issues with the book. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought of it consciously, but it's my guess that one of the reasons why you are I want to say the words. Why you appreciate the power, or you see power in the teachings I do, is because you know I believe fully what I'm saying. The level of conviction and belief in what I'm saying. But when I knew that there was a foundation for what I'm saying that had issues and questions, I lost the ability to speak that way, not knowing how to deal with those issues. That make sense? Okay? So we put the New Testament on the shelf for a little while. Guess what? The Old Testament has same problem. Not exactly the same way, slightly different, but the same problem. So we ended up putting that on the shelf. Now, people will say, you rejected Messiah. No, I didn't. Hard to defend him, though, without a New Testament. Then again, hard to defend everything without the Bible at all. I just didn't know what to do with it. We did not go off and now start doing paganism and everything else, but we just didn't have this. Funny, some people say, well, you're going to do Christmas now? I never did. Why would I start doing it now? Why would I do something I already know is wrong? I might not know exactly what's right, but I certainly know what already was wrong. Anyway, my point being that we then went on a 7-year journey that only when I came back, long story short, I realized that lots of people go on this journey and I can help them now. Because if you talk to the people going down that journey, they will say the same thing to every one of you. You don't understand because you're not going down this journey. You haven't, because they do the same thing still to me. I'll meet somebody who thinks that, they'll go, well, what about this verse? I've heard that verse. What about this book? Heard that book. What about this guy's teacher? Seen it. Whatever you think you've got, I've seen it. I did a full research. I've been exposed to all the stuff that you're going to say disturbs you or is leading you to reject something, whatever it is. I had 7 years. That gives me what we call, I guess, street cred. I didn't just have it for 5 minutes. But if you're talking to somebody that's never had this issue, that person can't understand what you're going through. Those of you that lost children, teenagers, or young adults, if you've never had that experience, how can you understand what that feels like? Okay? I've not ever lost an immediate family member. I've lost some grandparents, some people I knew barely, I was very little. I haven't lost a mother, a father, a brother, or anything like that. So I don't know that feeling. I mean, I know what it looks like because my wife lost her mother, and I know what that looked like in her. So I experienced it sort of through her. But you can't understand something until you go through it. So the fact that you went through it makes you a value to someone else going through it. So that's where this becomes a value. So those of you that have had those losses, you will eventually run into other people that need what you'll be able to give them once you've gotten through it. The encouragement that you can give. We learned this too when, and by the way, when I'm talking about the trauma, that lost the whole ministry, shut down. I shouldn't say I lost it. I closed it down. I didn't feel it was appropriate to keep doing it when I was doing the searching. And I always was searching to get the answers to my issues. He just didn't choose to give them to me for 7 years. Thanks. Okay? But he used the trauma of my wife's mother's getting a stroke and being in hospice and dying, and my wife's being distraught as a timing to give me answers. Because just like the launch of this ministry, the first time, when I told you the story how she wanted and she needed, and I said, I will provide it. And she said, well, what if you can't find a place to go? And I said, well, then I'll start something. And some of you have come up and thanked me to thank her, and I appreciate that. They thanked me saying, thank you for meeting your wife's need. Because that's where this all came from. But that was the first time around. Second time around, she called me up, desperately crying, totally distraught. Her mother was dying, and she said to me, I used to know what was going to happen next. She said, but without this book, I'm lost. And that reminded me and made it clear to me, I don't know how people live without this. How do you live a life with not knowing what's going on? I mean, that's scary. No wonder people are depressed all the time and suicidal and everything else. If you got nothing to hang any hope on, you don't have anything to look forward to, there's no expectation. So that's when I kind of half talked, half yelled up to Yahweh and said, enough. Can I get some answers now? I'm back in that same place. My wife needs something. And that night he gave me what I needed to say, and basically said, go get your seats, put them on, you're back on the work. Okay? But that was exactly 7 years, if you like your deeper stuff. So that's complete or perfect. starting 8, which is new beginnings, almost to the day when we stopped. So go figure that. In January of 2003 to January 2010. Okay? So just kind of figure how that worked out. Now, but again, I then, having lost stuff, I know what it's like to lose everything. Without the ministry, that was our thing that we were doing. We ended up moving. We ended up doing other things. It was a disaster for 7 years. It was just miserable. And so Yah showed us eventually to come back, but he wasn't going to let us have success outside. But I understand bankruptcy and moving back in with parents and struggling with new children and babies and being poor and everything you can think about. And this was going on in New York where it's $2,500 a month for a 3-bedroom apartment. And that's just a normal, everyday one. We're not talking about, some luxury condo or something. I mean, we were paying more for rent a year, $30,000, that half of a lot of the congregation in the South, the people even make. We're paying that for rent, if you can imagine. It's not easy to live up there. But the street cred that we developed. And then, of course, some of you would talk about the losses. I have empathy and can understand when you go through a miscarriage, because we did. If you've never gone through it, you have no idea what that feels like. You don't know how to comfort somebody going through something like that. And then we've had congregation members go through that, and I was able, and my wife was able to offer that comfort. Now, we weren't ready to do that when it first happened, and not for a little while after it first happened, until we finally did successfully end up with a baby. Because we had those miscarriages first. Okay? And so, just let that be an encouragement. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think we should all realize that what we're going through, he has a purpose for it, and it will bless somebody at some point. Right now, it's just killing you, and I understand it tears you up inside. But keep remembering, someday somebody else that feels like you do, you'll help them get through it quicker, because you'll be able to say, I know exactly how you feel. And you'll help them speed that process up just a little bit. Where for you, it's maybe a year and a half, 2 years, 3. They can do it maybe in 6 months faster, wouldn't it be great if you could have gotten over it like 6 months faster? They'll still go through the normal process. They'll take them a year or whatever it is, but maybe you can help them heal a little quicker. Encourage them a little quicker. Or at least just encourage them that their pain that they're going through is normal. Hey, it's okay, it's normal. You will get past this. So whatever you're going through, don't be so selfish. It's not that you're being selfish. Don't just think about that it's about you. At some point, you're going to bless somebody. Have that optimism and that hope to know Abba will use this in some way. Amen? Amen. Okay, like my wife's mother's stroke. It was awful and tragic, but Yah used it to relaunch all this. That's what relaunched all of this. It was her stroke. Okay, James, you remember your question now?
Yeah, I remember my question.
Oh, you just wanted to come up this time with the hat.
So my question has to do with the husband or the father's covering. There's many verses that talk about that the family is protected by the righteousness of the father or the husband. Noah's entire family was protected from his righteousness. No mention of their standing, his descendants. All of us are basically protected because of Abraham's righteousness. So,
well, you got to be careful of what you mean by protected, but yes.
Well, that's
bad things still obviously happen.
We don't make good choices too, but
no. But I mean, look, there were a lot of good people when Babylon came. A lot of good people when Assyria came. A lot of good people when the Romans came. I mean, there's still good people that were trying to, but the majority that were there, the leadership, etc., were doing things wrong, and they were not protected. Look, Noah was protected, yes, and so was his family, but everybody else was gone.
Yeah, so my question is the extent that our righteousness has for protecting our family.
It depends on what you mean, protecting them from what. I would say, look, you're in the world, we're in dispersion. Okay, so now we're in a whole different ballpark than when you're talking about Abraham or Noah. These are all people that were going down the line of coming into nationhood. Okay, and they were selected and they were promises made for them specifically. Excuse me. So that being said, I've not seen necessarily that the parents being covenanted necessarily in any kind of consistent way does anything for the children. Okay? Got a lot of covenanted parents that their children do very well and others where their children don't. Others where one child did great, one child ended up in all kinds of mess. It doesn't seem, statistically, if you look at it, like there's any kind of a pattern of that, okay? Now, if you and your wife are covenanted together, you provide a covering for her, that may affect that specifically. If your children come into covenant and they're in the house, that may affect it differently. But listen, I don't want to shock anybody. I've said this already a couple of times. Most of the children are not covenanted. In other words, they're not doing this because they have a relationship. Most. I don't mean like 99%. I just say most, more than half of them. They have, just like you, they have to have that moment where Yah's going to go boop and pop their bubble and get their attention, and they're going to figure out that they need to get serious about this. Generally doesn't happen until he's 20 years old. There are exceptions, but that generally doesn't happen. Okay? Does that help? Or at least, I don't know if it helps, but answer the question. It'd be helpful to say, yes, you protect everybody, but it's just, I don't think it works that way. All right? Now, for safety for your family, though, men, you're much safer if you're under a covering. Just like your family will be safer if they're under a covering and you provide that. By the way, just because you're the husband doesn't make you a covering. You got to act like one. You got to be one. You got to protect and provide and be the covering. Okay, you're not the covering just because you're a man. Your role of covering is just because you're a man. Now you got to walk it. You got to walk in it. We got a lot of men out here that struggle with that. You got ladies, encourage them. Men, if it's your brother and you know he's weak, encourage him. If that doesn't work, give him a kick. That's only if you're close enough friends to do that. Okay? And knock him upside the head and say, hey, come on, you can do this. Get in there, be the man, take care of your family. The family is always safer when the man is doing his job. And the wives will be much happier because their number one concern is security. And by the way, men, your number one concern is respect, and the ladies will respect you much more when you're providing them with security. Okay? And that's how we solve the husband-wife problem. You're welcome. No, seriously. Ladies, you can start, though, by showing them respect and telling them you believe them, etc. Men, take what little you get and run with it. I mean, get in there, take her hold of the reins, and go ahead and be the leader. If they give you just a little encouragement, take that, let it be a fuel to fire, and get in there and be the man. Go ahead. Take care of what needs to be taken care of. Look over the family. Make sure you're providing and protecting them. And then your wife will be inspired to give you a little bit more of that respect and that encouragement. Because you're all standing there, well, she doesn't respect me. What are you doing to be respected? Come on. We talk real only in this place, right? We don't mess around. We don't have time for all that messing around. Look in the mirror and realize, yep, I got to work on that. Both of you, ladies, men. You ladies are not, you're beating down and kicking your men. Telling them that they're useless and no good and lazy or whatever. They're just not providing what you need because you're feeling the pain of insecurity. You don't feel safe. When the ladies don't feel secure, they don't feel safe. And so men, they don't feel safe, you won't be happy. You know how they say, happy wife, happy life? She ain't going to be happy if she doesn't feel safe and secure. And see, she ain't happy, you ain't happy. Okay? The saying goes, ain't nobody happy if mama ain't happy. So make that a priority. And don't tell me you don't know that. You've been married more than 5 minutes. You know that's true. Okay? That doesn't mean you give in to everything she says. But if you're taking care of business and you're doing what you need to do, you can say no and in the right way, and it'll go fine. That's why I use the 100 yeses rule. It's not really one that I count, but you should be saying yes to almost everything unless there's a real reason for no. And if you ask my wife, she gets those yeses. Okay? By the way, just because you give the 100 yeses doesn't mean they'll handle the no. That's part of the deal you make, but doesn't mean it's going to work that way. Sometimes they get spoiled by all the yeses, and they're like, what do you mean no? Remember, we had a deal. Now, we can always stop the yeses, darling. and let you practice on no until you get it. And when you get it, we can go back to yeses. And you're all thinking, yeah, he's red. That's just, I have no problem saying that. Oh, the yes, no thing doesn't work for you? Let's do the no thing and see if we can get to yes eventually. No problem. I can practice either way. I'm good. Doesn't matter to me. Of course, that's because I'm red. It just doesn't matter to me. Okay? Now, next question. Rob.
Okay, from Johnny, it says, we don't celebrate Christmas, but we do have the lights. Is that bad?
Okay, so there's an idea in Scripture called the appearance of evil. Now, by evil, we're not talking about, world's version of it. Anything that goes against what Yahweh says is essentially scripturally evil. So if you put up anything that someone sees that thinks it's Christmas, that you're doing something Christmas related, no. Okay? My wife loves lights. She never did the Christmas thing, but she loves lights. And she has all kinds of ideas for lights that are not Christmassy, but yet as soon as she likes it, she'll find somebody hanging it on their house for Christmas. And I'm like, because she likes lights. Any kind of lights. It doesn't have to just be, the alternating colorful bulbs. She likes the sort of raindrop-looking stuff or whatever it is, like frozen icicles. She likes lights. She wants to put a light-up, like palm tree in her dining room or something. She likes things that are lit up and have things on them. But I said, look, we're not doing anything that anybody who looked at it thinks it's anywhere connected to Christmas. So that's what you have to ask. Would a reasonable person look at it and go, oh, look, that's a Christmas thing? If the answer is yes, no, then don't do it. Okay? So hopefully that answers the person's question. I'm not against lights. Lights are great. You can put all kinds of lights anywhere you want, just as long as nobody in their conclusion jumping would assume that you're doing a Christmas thing. Maybe you got to be the ones that take them down when everybody else is putting them up. That way you differentiate a little bit. Nowadays that means around August. And people leave them on now till like April. And I think it's mainly because they're just getting lazy. It's a lot of work to put them up, so they don't want to take them down. Go ahead.
All right. William Phillips, is it okay to eat holiday cookies and candy?
I always thought biting the heads off the chocolate Santas was great. They tasted so, something about that chocolate was just, And it's only 8:30. I'm not even started yet. Okay. Look, again, I wouldn't want anything that's related to any of that stuff. All right? And I know it's tempting because it's like pennies on the dollar like the day after the event for any of that stuff. And those chocolate stuffed with whatever, eggs and all that other stuff, it tastes good. There's some good stuff. If you're into candy, that's good stuff. I'm pretty simple when it comes to candy. I just like straight chocolate. Don't put anything in it. Don't flavor it with fruit and stuff or put nuts in it. But, I don't need to save that much money to get something that's got Santa Claus on it or an Easter egg or any of that kind of stuff. So I would stay away from it. Okay?
Okay, I got a couple on here. I want to try to put them together. Jennifer, when I was in Christianity, I read books about people saying they went to heaven or hell and they came back to tell about it. And then she wants to know what's going on there. And then Alana wants to know.
Well, the last time I was there, glad you asked. No, go ahead. What was the other thing?
And Alana says, can Rabbi expound on why he believes there is no hell? I've heard snippets in the Millennium and Kingdom, but I'd like to hear his full view on it.
That'll be in the Millennium and Kingdom Part 4. No. Okay. I just made a joke and I forgot made me forget the first question. The first question had to do with, the whole people go die, they think they went someplace and the dying experience. All right. I don't have a good answer for that. There's a thought in Judaism. It's a thought. Now bear in mind, the people I'm taking this thought from also believe in reincarnation. The Orthodox Jews, a lot of them believe in that, but that's not what the thought has to do with. But there's a thought that these people are not seeing or experiencing that place. We're talking about the heaven place first, or the light and everything. What they say is that the spark, the neshama that's in them is at that moment remembering where it came from. as opposed to seeing something currently where it's going. At that death moment or near-death moment, it has more awareness than the normal consciousness that we have to remember where it came from. I'm not saying that's true, but that's an interesting thought, because it's hard to argue with some of these people's experiences. And they're very adamant about the fact that this is really what they saw, what really happened. So I don't really know what to do with all that. But that's an interesting thought, okay? As far as their thoughts about going and seeing anything else negatively, there's a lot of people that are quite not anywhere near death that see all kinds of crazy things, especially the scary, negative monsters, demons, burning fires and hearing voices and all that stuff. So the mind can do amazing things, and not all of it good. So I don't really have a good answer. I'm sorry about that. Now, the second part of the question about hell, all right? Let's start with the simplicity. I don't know, do I want to? Okay. The simplicity of the first part of it is this. I had this thought back when I first was coming into any kind of belief, that I didn't see the point in believing in, worshiping a God that would torture beings forever. That seems not at all consistent with the Creator that the book talks about. The loving, merciful, compassionate. That's the way he describes himself over and over and over again throughout the Tanakh. And then he's going to torture you forever? No, merciful, perishing is merciful. Okay? We even talk about that with animals that are suffering. We're going to put them out of their misery. Okay? Well, guess what? The people that will end up in the lake of fire are miserable. Living that life and that evil and that rejection and that self-sovereignty and all of that fleshly stuff. You know any of those people? I do. I know people like that are just into that. Are they happy? They're miserable. It's merciful to perish. Now, it does talk about people that would be gnashing of teeth. Well, if you look at that, you have to understand. It's just like the child that thinks it was going to get away with something and then it finds out it really is going to get punished. Heading towards the punishment, they gnash their teeth pretty good. Are they really sorry? No. Are they mad that they're getting punished? Yes. So there might be some gnashing of teeth before they get thrown in the lake, so to speak, okay? But it's not torturing. Now, it does talk about the false prophet and the beast going in the fire, and they get tortured. But they're a whole different level of entity. They're not just your normal, average, everyday Joe, okay? And so that's a whole different sort of scenario. So the other part of it is that you must understand from your scriptures, and again, I don't have time to explain this because it would be something that would be in part 4 of the Millennium Kingdom, is that the word for things like hell, there are multiple words, okay? There is Gehenna, there is Sheol. There are different words for the grave, for in the ground. I mean, they mean different things. And so we have to understand. It's just like the word love. In your scriptures, the word love comes from several different words. Okay, you've got phileo, which is brotherly love, eros, which is sexual love. You've got agape, which is unconditional, Yahweh level love. But yet in English, we just see love. I love to use the example. You remember when, poor Peter, he keeps ending up in all kinds of problems. All right, so Yeshua's talking to Peter. He goes, Peter. He goes, yes, sir. He says, do you love me? He says, of course I do. I'm paraphrasing. He says, good, feed my sheep, or whatever he says. He goes, hey, Peter. He goes, what? He goes, do you love me? He goes, yes, I love you. He goes, okay, then take care of my sheep. Third time, hey, Peter. Yeah? Do you love me? Yes, I love you. In English, it seems like he's just mocking him and messing with him, doesn't it? Like, what's the deal here? He keeps asking, he keeps saying yes. In the Greek, it completely reads differently. Hey, Peter, do you agape me? Yes, Yeshua, I phileo you. Okay, those two totally different types of love. He asks him again, do you agape me? And I says, yes, see, there was a disconnect. But in English, it looks like he's just goofing with him, sort of. It's like, what is that all about? So we have to understand there are different words for these things. And so I'll get there eventually. Where's Norma? I'll get there eventually. She wants that teaching so bad. Okay? Who's next?
got a couple of Deuteronomy, I think some leftovers from today. Michelle Perez.
I'm sorry, we don't do Deuteronomy after, we finish. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Deuteronomy 32:10. Is this referring to us today, like being called in our wilderness and being led and instructed by him and called by his people?
32:10. I was going to be a wise guy and say, we'll cover that, Deuteronomy 32, we'll cover that around September when we get to that Torah portion. Okay. He found him in a wilderness and in a wasted, howling desert. He encompassed him. He made him understand. He watched over him as an apple of his eye, as an eagle stirs up its nest, flutters over its young, spreading out its wings, taking them up, bearing them on its wings. Now, what was the question? Now that I got the verse, is this referring to what?
Is this referring to us today, like being called in our wilderness and being led and instructed by him and called his people?
It's not going to be an either or type of thing. Yes, it probably refers to us today. Yes, it probably refers to things that happened between when this was said and now, and probably also still refers to stuff that hasn't happened yet. Okay? That's kind of Hebraic understanding. He was referring to something for then, probably multiple times between then and now, and still in the future. Okay, next question.
It says, from Tom Lasordo, Deuteronomy 33:13 through 17, especially on 17, could that mean how Joseph's descendants spread out throughout the rest of the earth?
Okay. Okay. I feel like giving never mind. I was always going to do like the Bob Newhart thing and say, we definitely don't go there. Okay, but that was from a counseling thing in one of his videos. All right. Look, I don't do the prophecy thing about the tribes thing and try to figure out where they go and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying it's wrong to do. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you studying it. I've not studied it. I mean, I'm familiar enough that I've looked at it, but I've not studied it. So I don't feel comfortable to try to look at the different tribes and the stuff here, the stuff in Genesis, and the other places where it talks about the tribes and all these prophetic sort of poetic language and sort of esoteric language to try to understand what it's actually talking about prophetically. I can promise you this, you don't need to know. In other words, it will affect zero in your walk. Or at least it shouldn't affect anything to do with your walk. You don't need this information to walk, is what I'm saying. Okay? All right. Next question.
From Tony, says, question, please explain Ephesians 4:30. What does it mean to grieve in the Spirit? Or grieve the Spirit?
You have to take the tongues class first. We teach you how to do that. She rode in on a Honda. She rode in on a Honda. She rode in on a Honda. Okay. Yikes. See? What chapter? 4, 6? What did you say?
Ephesians 4, chapter 4, verse 30.
4:30. Okay. And do not grieve the set-apart Spirit of Elohim by whom you are sealed for the day of redemption. Okay. So verse 29 says, let no corrupt word come out of your mouth by such as is good for your use in the building up, etc. Look, he's trying to give us human metaphors. Okay? He's saying, look, the set-apart Spirit, which Yeshua tells us in John, this is him. It's the Spirit of truth. Okay, you are set apart by the Spirit. You are called through the Spirit. You know what? For our picturing this as human beings, if I'm going to be leading you, pouring into you, going to be sharing with you, and you're just going to go off and do some dumb stuff, I'm going to be grieved watching you do that. That's what it's trying to let us know here. Okay? He says, do not grieve the Spirit. It's not a literal thing like that. Like it's an idiomatic phrase to say, this is going to bring grief or disappoint the Creator who is calling you out of all that mess, and you're still wanting to play in the mess. And this grieves him. Okay? Does that work for you? Otherwise, you can ride in on a Honda if it works for you, whatever. Okay, next question.
All right, from Dale Hersey. Rabbi, we want to become a taxi owner in Waga. My question, is it acceptable to offer the car to other contractors on Shabbat?
No.
We are not driving on the day they chose, and we profit 50%, Dale Hersey. It's, was a follow-up? All right, it's passive income not generated by us, but by an non-Israelite who chooses to operate on Shabbat. The car would be available if they choose.
Okay. I was already aware of the question because I heard that through Rabbi Tom. I guess you asked him the question. It was on the men's halakha group, etc. All right, let's be clear. If you are renting a building, a commercial building, and you rent that space monthly to somebody, and they're going to do whatever they do in it, whether they work on Saturdays with it or whatever they do in it, you are renting it for it's theirs for that whole period of time. Okay, and you're in the contract, you say they own that space essentially for that period of time. That's different than saying I'm going to work 6 days a week and let you drive my cab on Saturday, and then it's very obvious you're only doing it to get the money on Saturday, and you know they're absolutely only going to be driving it Saturday because you're driving it the other 6 days. All right. Now it'd be different if you had a cab business where you actually leased out a cab monthly and said, here's a cab, go drive it for the month. You see the difference? You don't know when they're driving. You know what they're planning to do with it. But if you're using it the other 6 days and you're giving it to them pretty much on Friday to drive on Saturday, that's not really, kosher. Okay? Let's not do that. Okay? It's the same thing like saying, okay, I'm going to go into business and buy a restaurant with my partner, and he's going to run it on Saturday, and I'm not going to run it. Listen, you own the business. You don't own a Shabbat working business. Okay, remember, it's different. You want to talk about passive income. It's different if I give you the thing and you have it over an extended period of time, and you may choose to, yes or no, drive it on a Saturday. You may choose to do anything that you wanted. You only drive it on Mondays for all I know. It's not my problem. I'm giving it to you for the month. All right? But if you know that you're literally leasing it to them to be used on Shabbat, no. Yes, it's passive income to you because they're doing it, but you're trying to take advantage of the fact that you're still wanting to make some money on an extra day. So really, you are doing business. Don't be a hypocrite. Sorry, Dale, didn't mean to call you a hypocrite. No, yes, I did. Okay? That's what we try to do. We're trying to find loopholes. Don't look for loopholes. Passive income is where the reasonable person who's looking at it will not say, oh, that's to work on Shabbat. Now, if you're only giving it to them on Shabbat, that's going to be clearly what they're doing. If you give it to them for the weekend, same thing. You know they're going to be doing it for Shabbat. I would say for it to be qualified as passive income that you are not liable for what they're doing, it's got to be over at least a month, on a monthly basis, and then it's theirs. It's no longer actually looked at as yours. You're using it most of the time, it's yours. You use it 0 of the time and it's just theirs, it's theirs. I'm okay with that. But if you're using it most of the week and they're using it one day, that's really clearly not the way it works. All right? Let's not be trying to find those loopholes. Okay. I'm sorry, Dale. I don't mean to call you a hypocrite. In this case, it would be hypocrisy to really put that through. I was just teasing you.
All right, Alex Tourville, question about the Torah portion. Are the events in Genesis 2 a more detailed description of what happened in chapter 1? Or did chapter 2 happen after Genesis 1?
No, it's just giving you more details.
Okay.
And by the way, that's not uncommon. You find a lot of things in scriptures where something happens and it plays through. Well, I guess the way you're looking at it. So it plays through this way. All right? Well, because this looks like I'm doing it backwards. Wait, if I do that 3 or 4 more times and go up and down, you'll think I'm Catholic. Is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? No. Okay. Half the people online think I'm doing Illuminati stuff too. All right. Okay? Now, what was that? What did I eat? It's left over from that eclair cake thing that we had. And I had too many of those. I'm still on a sugar rush from that. They're all like, what did you eat? No, see, you don't live around us. This is actually me most of the time. If you were at our office or if you were hanging out, ask Manny. I'm like this actually most of the time. And actually, this is pretty watered down still. Okay? Just so you know. Okay. But you're used to me being much more formal and at services and all that kind of stuff. But we're at Sukkot now. We're having some fun. Okay. So, what was I talking about anyway? I was doing something like with this. Okay, I know what I was talking about. No, I don't. What was I talking about?
Genesis 1 and 2, which came first?
Ah, yes. Now, thank you. Okay, the chicken. You said which came first? Oh, it wasn't the chicken or the egg question. Okay. Look, in scriptures, you find often that Yah takes you from point A to point B, and then he'll go back and do it again, not continuing going forward to give us more information about what happened from point A to point B. This actually happens a lot in your scriptures. Okay? All right? I mean, I wouldn't want to accidentally do one of those. Careful now, Rabbi. You're kind of, okay. Getting close. All right. James with the hat.
Yeah, to follow up to that one, the order of creation in Genesis 2 is different than in Genesis 1. One thing that I've heard is it's a zoom in on day 6 of what occurred in the garden. Since it's the creation of the garden, then he places man, and then he brings all the animals and stuff and things to him. Not necessarily in the order of the first one, but it's what occurred in the garden on the 6th day.
There's pieces that fit along with that for sure. Okay? But again, this is not it happened after. Okay? This is giving you some zoomed in insight to what happened during chapter 1. All right? Next question.
All right.
If you are willing to put that at risk.
What is Rabbi's understanding of taking a Nazarite vow in this time without a temple?
I have to tell you, I don't get it. And what I mean by I don't get it, why does anybody want to do this? I meet people all the time, they're like, I'm on a Nazarite vow. Why? I mean, really, I'm not even, this is not a joke. I'm like, what? Is there anything in Scripture that tells you why you would do this? No. So why are you doing it? Well, because I want to do a Nazarite vow. Okay, so I want to understand, are you going to finish off when you're done, do the sacrifices, and shave your body? If you're not going to do that, then what are you doing? Look, do you understand that the Nazarite vow is only listed in one place, okay? And the only other place it's mentioned at all is Samson. Do we understand that? You have it in Numbers chapter 6. That's the only place it's talked about. Okay? And now, of course, in the book of Acts, you do see it mentioned because Paul is asked to do it. Okay, so that's the other place. But Paul's asked to do it to prove something, that he wasn't teaching against circumcision. And so he goes to do that. But here, it tells you when a man or a woman does separate by making a vow of a Nazarite to be separate to Yahweh. To be separate to Yahweh. But for what purpose? Who does it? Why do they do it? We don't really read about anybody doing it except Samson, and of course Paul doing it at the end there. So I don't really understand. But, just so we understand as you go through this, and the Nazarite shall shave the head of his separation at the door of the tent of meeting. Well, first of all, there's no door of the tent of meeting to go and shave your head at. Okay, so take the hair from the head of his separation and put it on the fire, which is under the slaughtering of the peace offering. I mean, you got all these things that are going on. I mean, are you going to do that? We're going to see a bunch of bald-headed people running around going, I did a Nazarite vow. I'm not trying to mock it. I really don't understand what you think you're accomplishing. And I've met some people that tell me, I can't eat those grapes or I can't do this thing. I'm on a Nazarite vow. why? I mean, I don't see anything in Scripture to give us reason to ever do it. It does talks about if someone does do it, how to do it. You know, you can't eat all these things. You can't come into I mean, you really have to stay away from anything that comes from the grape. But to what point? So to the person who asked that question, first of all, I don't think you can really do it because it really is connected to the temple and to all these other parts of the rituals. But even if you were to do it, for what point? Well, I want to be separate to Yahweh. But you're already separate to Yahweh by making a covenant. So I don't know, okay? Anyway, next question. I mean, just...
All right. Nitty, does the fact that Lot did not go to the mountain as instructed a warning to us? His life didn't go well after his rebellion?
Look, all things where people were supposed to do something and didn't do it and it went badly are all warnings to us, I guess, to some degree. I mean, Paul says these things are written as examples for us, so yes. Okay? I mean, there's probably other things to it, etc. I mean, it's just part of what happened. But anything where somebody was supposed to do something, they didn't do it, and it didn't go well, a lesson to you. Okay? Go ahead.
All right. There's Charlie and Deanne Loudson. Proverbs 28:9. Would this mean that all Gentile prayers are abominations?
He who turns away his ear from hearing the Torah, even his prayer, is an abomination. See, this is again where we're having the disconnect. Read the question again to me. So I want you to hear the disconnect. Go ahead.
Okay. Proverbs 28:9. Would this mean that all Gentile prayers are abominations?
What's the wording there? All Gentiles. Is this verse talking about Gentiles? No. It's the one who turns his ear away from Torah, which you wouldn't have your ear open to it in the first place if you were still Gentile. So he's not referring to 99.9% of your book is not talking about Gentiles. Now, it mentions them in passing as you interact with them, but it's written to covenanted people. It's written for covenanted people. He says in the verse, he who turns away, in other words, rejects. You're not going to reject something unless you know what it is in this kind of form. He says, even his prayer is an abomination. The Gentiles have nothing to reject. They don't even see it as valid to be in the first place. So you're not rejecting it. They never would have thought it was anything in the first. You can't reject something that way. Scripturally, the rejection is that you saw it, you knew it, your eyes were open, your ears were open, and you said, nah, I don't want it. I'm going to do what I want. When you do that, even your prayer is an abomination. Some of you know this feeling. You pray and you feel like it's not going past the ceiling and nobody's listening. Well, because maybe you haven't fixed something you need to fix. Okay, next question.
Some glamour flex. Does Rabbi believe in speaking in tongues as Pentecostals do?
No, only the way that you ride on Hondas. No, I don't believe in speaking in tongues as charismatics do. Look, at some point, I guess I'll do a teaching on it. Rabbi Tom did a teaching on it a while ago. You have to understand a couple of things real quickly, okay? I guess this is a good opportunity to kind of, you know what's funny? The tongues question always comes up. Of course, I kind of stimulated it by throwing that little joke in there, but got all the charismatics and, Assemblies of God people and Pentecostals, whatever, online going, what? That's not, Sorry. What you have to understand is some context. Well, first of all, what happens in the book of Acts on chapter 2, okay, is a hearing miracle. Maybe we should look at that real quickly. Okay? Acts chapter 2 is a hearing miracle. And the funny thing is, I got to tell you how funny this is. So I'm in New Zealand. I'm with Curtis. We're doing a Q&A session, and we really somehow managed to get through the whole thing without that question. And then we're really closing down. A person goes, I just got one. Can we get one more person in? And they're like, well, what do you think of the tongues question? And I was just like, really? You waited till last to do that? And Curtis about fell out of his chair laughing because I was the one on the mic at the time. He's like, go for it. It's yours. You know. It's all yours, buddy. All right. Acts chapter 2. So there's a couple of interesting things going on here. The first thing is that verse 6 says, when this sound came to be, the crowd came together and were confused because everyone heard them speak in his own language. Is that ambiguous? Everyone heard the people speaking in their own language. And they were confused because, he said, they were amazed and marveled, saying to each other, look, are not all of these who are speaking Galilean? And how do we hear? I know this is tough. He keeps talking about auditory stuff. You know, how do we hear each one in our own language in which we were born? Parthian, Medes, etc. I say etc. because I can't pronounce half of them. Okay. Next, we get to, we hear them speaking in our own tongue. So let's get the word tongue out of there because that's what's screwing you all up. That's what you hear from all the Pentecostals, Charismatics, and everybody else. The word means language. You think tongue is like this thing, this other. No, it's the word in Greek just means language, but the word they used back then was a tongue. English, Greek, they didn't have English even so much that way. You had Greek and you had Latin and you had Hebrew and you had different, you didn't have, and you have all this stuff, right? The Medes, the Parthians, etc., and the ones I can't pronounce. You have all of those things here. Is that so they're all speaking in our own language, the great deeds of Elohim. So they're hearing all this stuff. Okay. Point number one, they were amazed because they were hearing something. And by the way, the people speaking had no doubt that they knew what they were saying. They were speaking. That's a miracle. If you speak another language, and I'm speaking like I am now, and you're hearing it in your language, that's pretty incredible. I mean, that's a miracle. Now, this is the cool part that you probably missed and probably never heard from your Pentecostal, Charismatic, whatever. Okay? And by the way, they're still doing this in the Messicostals as well. And I made up that word, so it's mine. I'm going to get it copyrighted. The Messianic Pentecostals, the Messicostals. Okay. And they were all amazed and were puzzled, saying to each other, what does this mean? Listen to the next verse. Now, so far, everybody speaking has heard the language in their own language. They've heard in the deeds of Elohim in their own language, and they're all amazed. And then we have the verse that says, and others, not the ones who've been speaking up to this point, neither the ones speaking the deeds of Elohim or the ones claiming to hear it in their own language, but others mocking. Who are they mocking? The people speaking the deeds of Elohim or the people claiming to have a miracle? Others mocking said, they have been filled with sweet wine. Not the speakers. See, the charismatic says, they sound all babbling and drunk. No, they thought the people claiming to hear in their own language were drunk. You guys are drunk. They're just speaking Galilean. See, some of them didn't get to hear the miracle. Not everybody heard the miracle. So they thought those people were crazy. They were mocking, saying, they've been filled with sweet wine. And so this is the problem. The problem is how people interpret these verses. They miss the fact that it's all about what they hear. By the way, is there anybody interpreting at this point? Yes, every one of them is interpreting perfectly. They all heard it in their own language. I mean, think about it. It didn't need an interpreter, though. It definitely didn't. They all understood quite clearly. So then we get to Paul in 1 Corinthians. Now we have a couple of problems here. One is, even Paul doesn't talk about it anywhere else. But it really is in one place, in one book, and nobody really knows for sure what Paul's talking about. Okay? So I don't know what to do with it because Paul seems to be talking about something that needs a third-party interpreter. Because what happened in Acts didn't need any interpreter, didn't need a third person. They were speaking, and the listeners understood perfectly. Can you understand why that miracle makes sense anyway? If you speak, well, you speak Spanish. If that's your first language, if I speak to you in English, you might miss something possibly, although you've been here a while, but if I said it in your language, you wouldn't miss a thing. There are nuances and subtleties that if I told you it in your language, we'd communicate better because it's your language. Like someone who's trying to explain something to me in English, but English is not their language, they're going to have more trouble with it. But if they could speak my language in a fluent way, if I could speak in their language, they would understand it so well. My wife is a Romanian. Her father is Romanian. He doesn't speak English as well as he speaks Romanian. So when she talks to him on the phone, even if she talks English, if there's something he doesn't understand real well, she switches to his language. And then he understands it. Okay? So you can understand, when they're going to speak the great deeds of Elohim, and Kepha's about to get up there and give this tremendous sermon, so to speak, this brief, powerful thing that he's about to do, he wanted to make sure, he wanted to make sure that everybody heard it correctly, that there weren't any subtleties missed. And of course, now translations and everything else, we have nothing but subtleties that are missed. Actually, I don't think it's that subtle to say they heard it. They didn't hear them speaking and babbling and all this other stuff. They heard it in their own language. In the charismatic churches, people are not hearing it in their own languages. Now, I'm going to tell you two stories. At least two, but I'll tell you two stories. And this is from somebody who speaks Russian. Okay? And he was at a congregation in Nashville. And he's from Russia, fluent Russian, moved here, as an adult. And somebody started doing the tongues thing. And somebody interpreted. And he stood up and said, "Excuse me." That person was speaking Russian. And they said, "Oh, well, what did they say?" He said, "I can't say that in this place." It wasn't good. Oh. Okay. So that kind of thing happened. Another time he was in a different congregation, and the pastor before services was speaking to somebody in the front row that he knew who was a missionary from back when they were in college or something like that. And they're speaking. But they're speaking a language that nobody seemed to know. Whatever. There was a speaking going on in a language that was very strange. Turned out it was like New Guinea or something nobody really understood the language. So the person that normally stood up with the interpretation, you ever notice it's almost always the same person? That person's got a lot of power because they can make up anything. So the person starts interpreting, and the pastor goes, "What are you doing?" They said, "I'm interpreting." "Interpreting what?" "What you guys are saying." He says, "We're speaking to each other." Wow, yeah. So is this whole tongue thing always kind of, I would really be smoke and mirrors and a lot of stuff that's going on there. I mean, I don't know. I think that one of those things that I put up on the shelf is I have no idea what Paul's talking about. It does not match what's going on in the book of Acts, so I don't know what to do with it. I've had people say, "Well, that guy, Rabbi Steve, he's not qualified to lead because he doesn't speak in tongues." Actually, no, I'm sorry. It was more than that. He's not filled with the Spirit, so he's not qualified to lead because he doesn't speak in tongues. So I laughed when he told me this. I said, "Wait," I said, "so you think what you hear me do every Shabbat is all on my strength?" I said, "I'm not that good. I have some talent at speaking, and I'm charismatic in terms of my personality and stuff." I said, "But that stuff that you're getting, that ain't all from my power." It's also not in good English the way I just said it either, but okay? I said, "Really? Do you think that I'm that good? That I can do what you hear me do every Shabbat? That I don't have the Spirit?" And he started spreading that around the congregation. We had to say to him, "If you keep spreading this around the congregation, you're going to have to go." And he kept doing it, and he had to go. Now, just so you understand my personality, if everybody thinks, "Well, if you do this, Rabbi Steve's going to boot you out." This guy did the right thing at some point after he was spreading it. He had a little dinner with me. We met at a place. We had like a little cup of coffee. Not a dinner, really, but like a cup of coffee. And he told me this was his feelings, his positions. He really beat around the bush quite a bit. And I finally said, "Well, will you just tell me what it is that's your problem?" And he finally got to that whole point. And then I said to him, I said, "Look, I don't have a problem with you feeling that way. Lots of people feel all kinds of different ways. But as long as you're not trying to spread that to everybody, that's your personal thing, then you can keep coming while you struggle or deal with or whatever you believe. That's fine." And so Some of you would think, well, I wouldn't have been that merciful. It's just, we all come with different mess. And I don't mind you coming with your mess. Don't be contagious with it. Well, he started being very contagious with it. And it was brought to the attention to me by lots of people who said, you know, he's told me this and he told this one that. And he didn't act surprised. I said, look, I told you not to do this. You're doing it. He said, I understand. I said, you got to go. I gave you an opportunity. Okay? But you understand, that's where people get this, well, he doesn't speak in tongues, so he doesn't have the Spirit. You know, Paul does say in his writings that not all speak in tongues. What? That means that it's not necessary. Do you understand that? Okay, verse 28 of chapter 12, 1 Corinthians. Elohim has appointed these in the assembly. Firstly, emissaries, secondly, prophets, thirdly, teachers. After that, miracles, gifts of healings, helps, ministrations, kinds of tongues. Then he goes, are all emissaries? No. Are all prophets? No. Are all teachers? No. Are all workers of miracles? No. Do all have gifts of healing? No. Do all speak with tongues? No. Do all interpret? No. So clearly, do all of us have to be emissaries? Because if you say that all of us have to speak in tongues, then all of us have to be prophets, all of us have to be teachers, all of us have to do miracles, that's the foolishness of this interpretation. Why are we so selectively interpreting these things and understanding these things? He says, no. We don't all have to do it. It's not a sign of being filled with the Spirit. Well, what about in Acts where it said that these people received the Spirit the same as... Yes, they got to hear the message in their own language. That was very nice. It endorsed that they were getting the same message. This is beating up against and banging up against what you've been told all the time. Okay? And you got to just understand, the book doesn't actually say what you want it to say or what they said it says. And it doesn't mean what they say it means. And by the way, how do you know, how do you establish something? 2, 3 witnesses? How many people normally are interpreting? 1. It's almost always the same person, right? So how do you know what they're saying? How do you know the interpretation's right? I'm going to give you an example. All right? I hope you get excited about this. We are currently working on putting the teachings into Spanish. Okay? And now one of the things that I insisted on doing, if we were going to do that, is I wanted to have more than one person to check the translation done into Spanish to make sure it was saying what I said. Not because the person doing the translation would make an error on purpose, but they have to interpret. In other words, they have to filter. It's not, we talk about translations versus interpretations, because the language does not translate word for word perfectly. And the phrases that I use don't always translate very simply into that other language. And so I needed to make sure that the interpreter, who I know is doing a reasonably good job, I need someone to check the interpretation. That doesn't happen in the charismatic churches, does it? There's nobody there to say, now the Russian guy figured it out on that one time. Oh yeah, they were speaking a real language. It wasn't pretty though. It was every foul word that I learned as a kid. That doesn't mean that every time someone speaks in tongues that they're actually speaking a real language. But I'm saying in that case, it was. So just understand that, this thing has become an obsession among the charismatics. Now, one more piece of this puzzle. Most, if not all, pagan religions have this babbling thing that they do, where they're making sounds with no words. Dancing around a fire, usually. That's not a joke. I mean, that's literally a lot of times you find them going around a fire and they're basically making groanings or noise. The Native Americans, you find them doing stuff, dancing around a fire. A lot of other cultures dancing around, and there's sounds coming out of their mouth, and I'm not going to make them or mock anybody. Okay? I already did the Honda thing. Okay? But, hey, listen, Honda is a very important thing. Because after all, they were all in Jerusalem in one accord. In the book of Acts. That's why they were speaking and riding on a Honda. Okay, now. It's almost 10 o'clock. Okay. So, but recognize, as we're talking about these things, paganism has these things in a very, very common way. All right? And you get that Kundalini stuff going on. That ain't right, that stuff. And you have the great thing that happened up in Toronto and the great thing that happened out in California. You got all of this other stuff that people point to. This is not of Yah. Okay? People rolling on the floors and doing all other crazy stuff, that's not things being, of sound mind and in order. So, no, that's my position on the whole tongues thing. By the way, the other thing I would say about it is the few times I've been around people that were doing that, I was with a group of people, I was a guest speaker, I had no idea that they were all tongue speakers, but they were. They decided they want to put me in the middle of the room in a chair so they could pray over me. I didn't know what was going on, and they started babbling in tongues, but this is what it sounded like to me. Father, we come before you, blah, blah, whatever they were doing, and then said some more stuff, and then they babbled some more. And you know what? I noticed that if you took the babbling out, it was almost like the spiritual babbling version of like they were trying to think of the next thing to say. Because really, if you'd taken those pieces out, it actually was a pretty straightforward sentence. But whenever they ran out of stuff to say, they'd start babbling. Then they would continue in English. That's what happened in my experience. I'm not saying that's what always happens, but I'm saying these were people, this was their thing, they were very much charismatic. But I noticed that there was an actual, it was almost like the tongue-speaking version of like when you're trying to think of what to say. But yet, then they continued without really any gaps in the thought. They just continued talking. So I don't know. I mean, with that whole thing, now, by the way, when that happens, I didn't say Amen. Okay, you have to understand where the Amen thing comes from. Amen comes from the meaning it is agreed. Some of you have to go, no, Amen comes from Amen Ra, and it's about Egypt and it's pagan. No, stop that. In Hebrew, that means it is agreed. And by the way, that appears in Deuteronomy. We read that, right, today. Or whatever. We read it in one of the readings. And all the people said, Amen. Okay, it is agreed. So when you are with people and there's prayer, you're saying Amen only if you agree with what was said. You know what that means? That when you pray by yourself, you don't need to say it. Because all of you finish your prayer, and I say all this stuff in Yeshua's name, Amen. You agreeing with yourself? Okay? Now, when we say Amen, Amen, really the first one's a question. Amen? Okay, in other words, does everybody agree? And means and, it is agreed. Amen. Amen, Amen. Is it agreed? And it's agreed. Okay? So you say it almost like a question. Amen? All right. Amen, Amen. Is it agreed? It's agreed. And so that's a hard habit to break, though. Even praying by yourself. I still catch myself doing it. I'm trying to break that habit, but I keep trying. It's like, of course I agree with myself. Well, most of the time. Anyway, that's another problem I have, and we don't have time to discuss it. Wait a minute, I'm having a moment. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, never mind. Okay, next question. Are we still doing a Torah study here, or Midrash? Okay.
All right, two more questions and we'll get it to the line over here. BG Lord asks, I'm 75 and only have Social Security. According to tithing teaching, Rabbi Steve said not to tithe on Social Security. As I'm new to this and did not tithe earlier in life, how do I get blessed?
Okay, blessing doesn't only come from tithing. Okay? Blessing comes from what? Obedience. There you go. Actually, you guys did good with that. All right, blessing comes from obedience. Now, Social Security, see, a lot of you, we're all trained wrong on that. It's not Social Security. It's Social Security insurance. Okay, on your paycheck it says SSI. We forget that it's an insurance program. And it's helping to keep you from being in the poorhouse so you have just a minimal amount to live on, to supplement and assure that you wouldn't just end up in total desperation and poverty. Okay, now, at the rate that they pay people now, that's not actually doing enough. But that's what was the intention of it. That's not lucratively produced income. Yes, it's based on what you made before, but you paid into that with your FICA taxes. And that's a lot of money, that FICA tax, okay? And so you put into that. You paid for this insurance. So it's not lucrative income. This is not something you would tithe on. It's not an increase. Yes, you're getting money, but it's a benevolence. It's a payout of an insurance program. And so you wouldn't tithe on that. Now, some people get a pretty good one, and maybe they have other things helping their lives, and they may want to make an offering of some sort. You can certainly make an offering. You want to put $5 in the box or whatever, you're always welcome to do that. That's your heart being expressed. And so that also would bring blessings. So the person's asking, you can always make offerings. Offerings are part of bringing blessings if you want to do it from a financial side. And also, you may be getting Social Security, and you already have plenty of money put aside in a great retirement program. Well, you're tithing on that when you first made it, or you're tithing on the increase that happened from the investments. Look, if you put $100,000 into your retirement and you got $1 million coming out of it, you got an increase. You can tithe on the increase. Just like any other investment, it's an increase. Okay, but you already tithed, well, maybe not. I'm assuming that you tithed on the income when you had it put into the retirement program. Okay, if you did, then you don't have anything to tithe on except the increase. Okay? But generally speaking, when I talk to especially people that are on disability, Social Security disability, I said, this is not tithable. It's offerable, but it's not tithable. But you know what? It's funny. I've got more people on that kind of a program that are frustrated wanting to tithe than people with lots of more income who don't want to tithe. Isn't that sad? I literally have people that I've had people I had to argue with, and I said, forget it, fine, put your 10% in. It's not a tithe. I'm not going to argue with you. Put it in. Because my point is, why are you putting it in if I'm going to have to give it back to you because you're now going to be in need? You're on disability. The government gives you like $700 a month on disability, whatever it is, $700-800. It's not a lot of money. You got to pay rent and food and electric and everything with that. That's not enough money to really live on. And so, no, you don't tithe on that, okay? I got a bunch of people tithing on their tax refund. Well, did you tithe on it before you put it in on your paychecks? You don't have to tithe on a refund. You're just getting your money back. You can make an offering if you feel like it. I mean, that's just whatever. Anytime you have a heart to give and support what's going on, then that's an offering, okay? All right, next question.
All right, Sean and Anna are asking, could 1 Timothy 2:9 be explained? And a follow-up to that is, modesty from 1 Timothy 2:9 defined anywhere in the Torah?
Okay. So in Timothy it says, likewise that the women dress themselves becomingly with decency and sensibleness, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly garments, but with good works, which is becoming for women undertaking worship of Elohim. Okay. Now bear in mind that there is no adding or taking away. So this doesn't appear anywhere in the Tanakh, so it doesn't have a Tanakh basis for it that way. The idea of being decent and being becomingly, or et cetera, being decent, well, that seems to make a lot of sense on everybody's understanding. The question is, what defines it? And you know what defines it? Culture, society. That defines it, okay? Over the years and over the centuries, some of those things have changed in terms of dress and what's appropriate. And so whether it's Torah or not, and there isn't any Torah to say what you should dress like. I think that we understand that we're coming before the king, and that even the priests had to put on special clothing to come before the king. And there's this. So I've always said, hey, you know what? You should have clothing that you would wear to come before a king. I even think if you ended up going to visit a worldly place, whether you got invited to something where there was going to be a president or a king or a queen or whatever, you might not just show up in T-shirt and shorts, if they would even let you show up like that. Because you would recognize whether I care that they're king or not, whether they're my king or anything, there is a protocol for going before authorities. You dress a certain way when you go to court. At least you should, right? Because there's an appropriate dress for court. Because there's an authority in the room. All right? And our king is also our judge. So you got it both ways. All right? So let's understand that there is absolutely a great message here that Paul is giving Timothy about decentness, doing things in decency. But I want to take this, as an opportunity to give you some other pieces for this. There will be at times people that will dress in a way that you will think is indecent. There's a difference, by the way, between indecent and inappropriate. Okay? Indecent generally means something sexually provocative. Exposing something shouldn't be exposed. Okay? Where inappropriate means, well, it's nothing indecent about it, but it's not really appropriate for where we are and what we're doing. It's not the appropriate type of clothing. You're not going to dress in like a formal dress or in a suit to go play in the gym. It's not the appropriate clothing for playing in a gym. Well, gym clothes aren't the appropriate clothing for being in a service. And I really don't understand, and maybe I just never been to places where you've been, but I'm guessing, generally speaking, that you didn't dress as casually as you do now when you used to go to church. Okay? Now, some people told me, yes, we did. Well, that was maybe the oddball church. But I know most people dressed up to go to church. And we're expected to dress up to go to church. And that's why we get the phrase Sunday best. And by the way, I think that's a good phrase. I mean, you should be putting on something that's among your best to come before the King. And so I just never could understand why people come into the Messianic out of the churches and all of a sudden it's okay to show up in flip-flops and a t-shirt and shorts. And I've seen that. When I say t-shirt, I'm not talking about a t-shirt. I'm talking about an undershirt. Okay? Like something you're not supposed to be wearing outside. But I also see people that just wear whatever t-shirt they normally would wear and they're dirty jeans, whatever, they're worn out. And somebody might say, but I'm poor. If you're tithing second tithe, use that money to buy an outfit for Sabbath. Sabbath's a feast. You can use your second tithe to buy yourself a Sabbath outfit. You can use it to buy yourself a Sukkot outfit. Get yourself some clothes. A nice pair of shoes. Look decent. Oh, decent we said had more. Look appropriate. All right? I mean, I try to set the example. I try to wear a nice pair of slacks, at least a button shirt. I think that's a simple, it's appropriate. It looks like I'm going someplace that's more formal than a t-shirt and jeans. But I know you didn't do that at church. Like I went to a church, everybody wore suits and dresses. How many of you went to that kind of a church? How many of you went to a church where people actually were there in t-shirts and shorts or t-shirts and jeans? A few of you, okay. Was that the majority, though, or just some people? The majority? Wow. Calvary Chapel? In California? Hey, look, I know the pastors now, the whole idea is to be the untucked shirt and the holes in the jeans and the whole thing to get all casual. It's like the big deal. I won't judge you what you do. And I just think that you have to remember, we're having a Mikra Kodesh. Excuse me, we have a Mikra Kodesh. It's a commanded assembly. That means we're meeting with the King. I mean, if Yeshua himself was going to be here, would you dress in a t-shirt and jeans? Well, aren't you hoping that essentially, in essence, his presence, he's going to be here? We ask him to lead and guide all things. So why do we dress like that? All right, next point about decency. Well, go ahead.
I just have a little add-on about how you were talking about dress and in service. My question is, what does it stand for Shabbat? Not like a Bible study or a Torah study or whatever, but with gentlemen and their hats and sunglasses and stuff like that.
Look, I don't mind so much that stuff. I'm just saying is you need to be self-editing and understanding what you're doing and where you are and whether you're comfortable that if the King was actually here in the physical presence, I think he's here anyway. Do you think he would think what you're doing is appropriate? I don't have the right answer for that. I do what I think is appropriate. Okay? And that's dressed down a lot from where I used to be. I just don't love ties because they choke me. I happen to have a very large neck, relatively speaking, from blowing the trumpet and shofars and everything else. So it squeezes up on me pretty good. And so, I wear as dressed up as I go. I just don't wear the tie or the jacket. Well, we are in the South. It's a little hot for that most of the time. But I'm not going to show up in the jeans and the gym shoes and all that stuff for a holy day service or for Shabbat. So I try to set the lead and the example. Now, of course, back in the day, you'll say, well, back in the day, they just had sandals and robes. Yeah, well, back in the day, they did have that. But I think they still have the understanding of putting their best on, whatever their best was, to go to meet with the king. And so they would do that. I think that it's a good thing to do. Now, here's the other caveat that I wanted to say real quickly. And this is, I think, is important, about the decency part. We had an incident once. I only heard about it after the fact, or I would have put a stop to it so quick. And I don't know how I didn't notice it, but I just didn't. But apparently what happened was we had some people come to the services. This is before any of you were attending, okay? And a lady came with her, 16-year-old, 16-year-old daughter. And the daughter apparently was fairly voluptuous and had an awful lot of skin showing. And also had a skirt above the knee that was showing a whole lot of, she was just dressed like a worldly teenager, I guess, or whatever. And apparently some of the ladies freaked out and threw like jackets over her, a blanket or something, mortifying the poor kid. And I'm like, I never saw this. I didn't see the blanket. I didn't see any of it because I think the mother just said, forget it, we're out of here, and just left. And I was ashamed of the reaction. I don't care if the person comes in indecent. You have a way to say to them quietly and to the side, hey, we understand this is the way you dress today. No problem. This is how you understand things. But in here, we would really like it if we could cover some of that up and whatever. There's ways to do it without mortifying the poor person. Now, of course, if a person's just coming in and they're like in their 20s or 30s and they're like to flaunt stuff and that's the way they dress every week, you may have to say, we have a problem. You can't keep coming in like that. Okay? You can't be just getting all the men to get their attention because you're going to show off all the goods. But you got to treat people with a little bit more. You can't treat them like all of a sudden a prostitute walked in. That's, you think this woman's just come walking right off the street into your congregation. By the way, if there was a woman walking right off the street in the congregation, maybe she needs help. Why do we have to, can we just let them be there for the one time and then seek to understand and be gentle and figure it out? And not just do that. Maybe you can quietly take them to the side and offer a sweater, offer something, do it in a way that maintains their dignity and doesn't embarrass the life out of them. Okay? There's ways to do this that are not going to mortify the poor kid. And this is like a young girl. I don't remember how old she was, but she's like 15, 16. And I don't know how traumatizing that was. The first time you're in a group and the ladies are attacking you and throwing things on you and looking at you like you're a slut, hussy, whatever. Terrible. All right? That's just terrible. So let's be careful with that. Look, my wife got grief from all of the sort of Mennonite backgrounded people that were in our Knoxville congregation that because her dresses didn't come down to the floor. They were above her ankle. Not by a whole lot, but they didn't. And I said to her, you know what? I'm tired of the arguments. Can you just get some new dresses to go down to the floor so I don't have to argue with them? And of course, she didn't want to comply just because she's like, but there's nothing wrong with them. I said, I know. We're just starting all of this, and I just don't need the grief. Okay? Because if you can do something to give peace to your brother, okay, so what's it make? Does it make a difference if you wear one a little bit longer? Well, but I don't want to, but that's okay. Don't cause a stumbling for your brother. Right? So we try. Steve, you're up again.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a comment and a praise to maybe the ladies or their children, the young ladies, because Evelyn had been coming, and she hadn't come as much as Evan.
Okay, this is teenage daughter.
She's 15 now.
Okay.
And she came with the dress above the knee, and nobody bothered her that I ever heard. Mm-hmm. And just this last feast, we arrived, and she came with the same kind of short dress, and then just out of the blue, right before us, like, Dad, you got to take me shopping because I need a dress. And I got stuck sitting in the pizza area with the two little kids. There's another funny story, I don't know. But we'll miss that. And
he got to enjoy how much fun it is to go shopping with a teenage girl.
Well, she went and came back with a full-length dress, and I never told her anything.
Ah, see,
so she just
self-editing. How
Did
wonderful
it
is
on
that?
her own. So I want to praise the young ladies in the group, the Godot, I guess, and kids her age.
So that's a praise to our children.
Yes.
That's what Steve was saying, is a praise that she saw them and wanted to imitate them. Okay? See, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you, Steve, for saying that. And that's a praise because, you got to allow people a chance to grow. Okay? You might have to blindfold your husband in the meantime, but you have to. What are you looking at over here? Okay, there we go. All right? You understand? And guys, guard your eyes. This is a big thing. Judaism teaches us quite a bit, the idea of guarding the eyes. Guys, guard your eyes. Watch be aware of what you're looking at, what you're seeing, and if it's not something you should be looking at, look away, look somewhere else. Guard your eyes. Don't do it in a way that looks like you're obviously, going to embarrass somebody, but just find a reason to be somewhere else or look somewhere else or do something. Protect those eyes, because from those eyes come thoughts, and then emotions and problems and all those kind of things. Rick?
Yeah, just an observation. That next verse tells her what she should dress with good works, which is becoming for women undertaking worship of Elohim. And mine has a reference to 1 Corinthians 10:31.
Right.
Whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, and that relates to our current teaching series, Honor and Shame, do all to the esteem or to the honor of Elohim. So I don't think it's necessarily speaking out saying you can't wear any jewelry, but
No, it's not.
rather than
or
drawing
braiding
attention
the hair
to
and all this
yourself.
stuff. Look, again, a lot of it has to do with culture. I mean, there were certain things that maybe in that town, only the ones who were indecent braided their hair, or only the indecent did whatever. And so it had to do with the culture. Let's talk about it in the same context as some of the other things we talked about. If an average normal person would look at you and assume you were a prostitute or assume you were this or that, well, then you're probably not dressed right for this time and for this culture. Okay? In that culture, when Timothy was being instructed, there were certain things that people would have then associated with other things very directly. And so he said, look, don't do that to make people even think for a second that you're part of that, industry or group or whatever it is. All right, Rick.
Yeah, doesn't it go deeper than that, though, rather than, even costly clothes it mentions, which there's nothing necessarily indecent about costly clothes, but I read it as doing things to draw attention to yourself rather than Elohim, or the main purpose that we're all really there for.
Well, but you see, be careful when you say go deeper because we don't know what, maybe only certain people wore costly clothes that were in that kind of a thing at that time. We don't know what the reference is there to costly clothes. That's the translation in English. I don't know what the Greek is underlying that off the top of my head or anything, but again, the idea of costly clothes or showy clothes, it could be, again, the way people would doll themselves up for whatever it was in a different way than just being affluent and having costly clothes. It could be a puffing up thing as well, which is not decent either. So we don't really know, because remember, we are reading with Paul's writings something that is very unique in terms of Scripture. These are private conversations between him and individuals or him and congregations that we are only hearing half a conversation. There is an issue he's addressing that we're not aware of the details of. We're guessing. And so we're trying to glean what we can out of it, and who knows how close we are to getting it right, but we're trying. James, go ahead.
Well, just for an example, when my mom got her ears pierced the first time, her mom had a heart attack because her mom associated that only prostitutes pierced their ears at that time.
Okay.
So a lot of things are cultural.
Yes.
But the whole verse that he was alluding to pretty much sounds like, don't worry about what you're wearing so much. Don't try to use that to attract the proper attention. It's what you do.
Absolutely.
It is how you're supposed to do the attraction. Focus on that.
Absolutely. That would be the second part of the point. The point is talking literally about the clothing, etc., and the other is about, what we should be doing that really does that. Thank you, James. Okay, who's next? Okay?
Just general announcement. The kids are all out front waiting for the parents to pick them up. And
Your children are outside right here.
The teachers say to remind you parents that kids have to show up in their Shabbat clothing for the presentation in the morning.
Okay, so tomorrow's presentation in the morning, you don't have to be dressed up. You can or not, it doesn't matter. I will be dressed up because I don't change during the day. It's just easier for me for services for later. But the children need to be, for the presentation, already dressed up for Shabbat. Well, it's not Shabbat, for the holy day. Okay? So dress up your children for the presentation as they were instructed. Okay. What's next? Okay, Janet.
Rabbi, thank you. Going back to you were talking earlier about the parsha, the Torah readings, how we do it. So we follow, obviously, we go from Genesis to Deuteronomy, but my question is, in a previous congregation where we were also doing the Haftarah portion and the Brit Hadashah portion every week. Is that something that you would recommend for us to continue doing? I know it's a tradition, but I like to...
Sure, keep doing it. Okay. We don't do it on Tuesday night because we can't possibly squeeze that in the framework of the time we have. Yeah. Okay? Can't do it. Okay. I know people that do it on Saturday, and there's that whole section, that takes 2 hours or more. Because we had one Sukkot. Was it Passover or Sukkot? That doesn't matter. And the guys who I told you we had a little issue with that thought you had to do Torah portion every Shabbat, I gave that honor of leading the Saturday service to that gentleman because he came into our ministry. He called himself a rabbi. I thought that was his title. He certainly had experience and knowledge leading congregations. He was affiliating now with MTOI. And so that service went forever, and he went through the Torah portion, went through the Haftarah portion, went through the Brit Hadashah, and I didn't know he was going to do all that. But that took a good couple hours, okay? So yeah, now individually you have plenty of time to do those things on Shabbat, and certainly, or during the week or whatever, and that's certainly welcome to do it. Except, as a matter of fact, we are supposed to have, and I don't know why we don't have it yet. I guess it's still waiting on me to approve some things. But we're supposed to have a Torah portion calendar, little handout, little thing that you can have with the portion, the Haftarah portion, the Brit Hadashah, that you can have with an MTOI sort of branding on it, so you can have that to keep with you, so you always know what each week's portion is. Right. So we should have those available, hopefully, sometime when we first get back.
Awesome, thank you. My last question, Rabbi, chapter 34 of the Devarim, the last portion. When it says, he's talking about Moshe, how there was nobody like him, and he, for all that strong hand and all the great fearsome deeds which Moshe did before the eyes of all Israel. So it got my attention because there was a lot of faith in Moshe. That's the way I read it, when it says that Moshe, the fearsome deeds which Moshe did. So obviously he was the appointed anointed leader, but I think that he had to have a really high faith to do all the things that he did, and that was, I guess, credited to him. Is that he was righteous because that was part of it?
Yeah. Look, and if we're going to go with the translation of fearsome, what he's talking about, he said, look, he did these mighty deeds for all the strong hand and all the great fearsome deeds. In other words, he did things because he was filled with this high level of awe, reverence, and fear of Yahweh. And by fearsome deeds, it doesn't even have to be like the parting of the sea. Just to lead and deal with those crazy 2 million, 3 million people, it was a deed just to get through the day. Listen, if you could ever switch seats with me to just deal with 400 people or 100 people every week, it takes an incredible amount of everything. Multiply that by whatever to get to 2-3 million. He did some stuff. And he led nobody's ever done anything like that. Lead that big a group of people around, keep them together, keep them safe, get them to the end result in the land that they needed to be in. That's incredible. Okay, next.
Rabbi, are you talking about...
No, Santi, I'm not talking about the FFLZ sheet.
No?
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I'm talking about the MTOI one that we're coming out with. I have no interest in doing anything to do with First Fruits of Zion. Okay. First Fruits of Zion puts out a sheet, and you can get it for free, but they are something you don't need to be touching. Okay, they believe in what's called bilateral ecclesiology. Jew and Gentile, one in Messiah, but they stay Jew and Gentile. They believe in all kinds of really not right stuff. But they are the darling of the MJAA and the UMJC and all those guys. But if you had been listening, I said that we're coming out with an MTOI branded thing. I didn't say we were going to bring out FFOZ's sheet. Okay. Now.
I'm so glad that the Spanish translation is coming out. It's good news for my mission site in Panama.
Yes.
I'm so happy to hear it. So the Panamanian can be benefited. Because I had a hard time to introduce the faith in a more complete fashion. I'm looking forward to have this.
Awesome, fantastic. And by the way, it's really funny because about right after I did Beware False Prophets or something like that, I got contacted by somebody in Panama wanting to translate into Spanish, asked my permission. I said, sure. I've never heard anything about it since. I don't know if they did it. I don't know what ever happened with it. I've never seen it. It's never happened, whatever. But I said, sure, go ahead. Send me a copy when you're done. I'd like to see it. I mean, that was back then. I wasn't thinking things through to just say yes so easily. But I talked to the person quite a bit. I thought, that it might be okay. But I've never heard anything about it. But it'd be great that we can officially put some things into Panama. Didn't mean to come down on you so hard. I just have a real hard time and a disappointment. I've worked with FFOZ. I've talked to Boaz, Michael, back in the day. And he looked like he was coming in this direction at that time. And then completely just caved to the MJAA, etc. And so if you go to an MJAA place, they always have these on their tables. They've got all of their propaganda and their material, and it's just coming from a wrong place. Okay.
Yeah, if the material can reach Panama, the big group in the place, top of the mountain, I met so many Americans there. And also I can reach the local. The native.
Okay, well, we'll let you know. We'll be announcing it so you'll hear.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next, your turn.
Yay.
Thank you for waiting so patiently.
That's okay. That's okay. Hi, Rabbi.
Hi.
I'm Vicki Sessions. I'm from Texas.
Okay, awesome.
And we've had a wonderful Sukkot. And thank you so much.
What part of Texas?
It's midway between Houston and Dallas. And
Go Cowboys.
actually, I have a story about Olivier. I don't know where he went. I was at the Costco in the Houston area, and I saw an MTOI T-shirt in the parking lot. And I was going, MTOI guy. I didn't know who he was, and I'm chasing him through the parking lot. And then
That's funny.
And then we got together and had a good chat, and they're not too far away, so hopefully we'll get to join them.
Awesome.
Meet up sometime.
Okay.
That was awesome. So anyway, my question is, so the children of Israel came out of Egypt, and they went hither and yon, and eventually ended up on the east side of the Jordan. And Moshe looked in and saw the good land that he couldn't go in. But in Deuteronomy 11:24, it says, every place on which the sole of your foot treads is yours. From the wilderness and Lebanon, from the river Euphrates, even to the western sea, is your border. So I don't recall that any of the tribes got any of Lebanon, and I don't know whatever happened to the rest of it, all the way to the Euphrates.
Okay, that would be a good question for a different teacher. I don't study that part of this. I know for a fact that the land that was given was not the size of the land today, which is much smaller. It was a much bigger space. I'm not a geographical studier for this. I don't. When they start talking about, if you pointed on a map and showed me the land of Israel, ask me, well, where's Galilee and where's this and where's that? I mean, I could see the sea and I could try to figure. I don't study the journeys and the physical movements that a lot of you like to do that. I'm busy looking at the halakha. Okay, and so there are other teachers that can answer that question. I have no idea. Hey, listen, I'm a teacher who's willing to tell you I have no idea, and I have no idea on that one. Okay, I couldn't tell you. I know Dan was in the north. I know some of the other things. I know Judah was in the south. The 10 tribes in the north, and all these kind of things. But I don't have the whole geographic thing. And a lot of people have studied Yeshua's movements and where he went and the order of places he went and all those kind of things. No. Okay. Got to remember, I grew up in New York City. There was New York City, L.A., and then the rest of the world. I don't know. There was just not, something in between those two places. We didn't learn geography very well in New York. Okay, Anders.
All right. My question is regarding what you said today about if you had a gun and put it to our head and you gave us, do this or I'm going to shoot you. And you said that we still have the choice. And then you brought in that story from the Maccabees about how she was put, either you eat the pig or I'm going to skin you alive. So my question is, what she did, was that the correct way to act in that kind of situation?
Oh, she didn't do anything first. I mean, the children were asked one at a time, and they each made their own decision. She just had to stand there and watch it. Okay, so each one was asked one at a time, and each one watched the others but made the decision. Is it the right choice? I mean, the message there is, what's your price? You're going to obey, you're not going to obey. Yeshua talks about, can you be, because he says that one of the reasons that we're so impressed with him is that he was obedient, even obedient unto death. Is it the right choice?
Because how I'm thinking is that we have life in order to make decisions. And he gave us a mind to think and to come to conclusions and to make our judgment about things. But when you come with a gun to my head, we're no longer talking about reason. I mean, I get a choice that what would give life, you're going to reward it with death. And what would give death, that will give life. So you're twisting the whole thing. So you make what is good is bad, what is bad is good. So both equations, if I follow reason, both leads to death, no matter what I choose. So how I see it is that when you introduce force into the equation in an argument, it's done. You cannot, whatever comes out of that, you cannot really use that against you, because I'm left with a choice of two evils. And I'm just thinking about, for example, the Jews who were persecuted to confess Messiah or die. So I cannot see how, if they confess in that situation, I cannot see how God would hold that against them, because you have death for death. It's not a fair. So that's more my how I'm looking at it.
Okay, so does anybody recognize that there's more to this? Okay, what's missing? No, what's missing? Context. Okay, there's context missing. Okay, so there's one thing if I, as a crazed person, walk up to you and just put a gun to your head. It's another thing when we're talking about that this was done in the temple area, that this was done with the Greeks who were making a point to martyr people and to see if they could get the Jews to break, and they could talk to and use that as an example to other Jews to break. And just a crazy person coming and putting a gun to your head. There's a difference between that and the people that lied to hide Jews during the Holocaust. There's a difference between some of the things like Abraham lying about his wife being his sister and these kind of. So there's differences in different situations. You have to say, now, my point being before, though, that you have still freedom of choice. You still can choose. You're talking about the result of the choice, but you still have a choice. You can still choose to do or not do. I can't really make you do it. Now, you're talking about your thinking process about how you'd make the choice. I didn't say what the right choice was or the wrong choice was in any of those scenarios. I simply said, I can't really make you do it. Does everybody follow now? They could have eaten the pork or not. If I put a gun to your head, you could do whatever I ask you to do or not. And I didn't make it. Now, then you asked me if they did the right thing. Now you're asking me to make a judgment call. Now I got to think about it. Okay? But that wasn't the point I was making this morning. The point I was making this morning about, or this afternoon when I was talking about freedom of choice, you really always have freedom of choice if you're in control.
Thank you. I guess the judgment was what I was trying to hear from you. What would be the correct judgment?
Look, I mean, until you find yourself in those places, it's hard to know what you would do. But you got to understand that each situation has its own unique stuff. I mean, you have to be in that place with all the craziness that was going on at the time of the Maccabees, with what was going on with the Greeks. And it wasn't just the Greeks. The Jews were killing each other first. Okay? The Jews were killing the Hellenizing Jews, the Hellenistic Jews, the ones that were coming and becoming Greek. And that's when the Greeks actually started to get involved because it was just getting crazy. And then it got out of hand. And so in that time, in that context, in that culture, it's hard for me to say what was right, what was wrong, and how it should have or not. We just see the example. My point was that there's a choice, okay? And I gave you an example of someone who made the choice to die rather than do the other thing, and that was their choice. They had a choice. They could have ate the pork. Now, you talk about, well, if I eat the pork, then I'm bringing death into my future anyway because I'm sinning. Or if I die at the knife point, and I get slayed and dipped in the oil and the whole thing, will I die? Yeah, that's a tough sort of choice to figure out, okay? And I understand the quandary. And I think that Yahweh does have a certain amount of compassion on the fact that under force, how much do you really have control? Because really, to have total control is really hard. I mean, the only person that's ever really been on the planet with total control is Yeshua, the way I can see it, where he really had the freedom really to choose all the time. But then you see Hannah and her sons exemplifying that they had choice. Now, they may not have felt that they had choice, though. Maybe they felt that they had to say no. Then they really didn't have choice. So I'm just saying is, just remember that my point was, you can always choose. Just because I put a gun on your head doesn't mean you have to do what I say. You could choose to tell me, well, go ahead and shoot. And by the way, that doesn't mean I'm actually going to shoot you. But you have the power of your reaction. That's really the point I wanted to make.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. But that's a good question, though. I understand. Because it is a very, very difficult thing to think about. What would you do? What would you do? Look, Yeshua was given a choice. Go ahead and do it. Hasatan was talking to him, right? Go do this and this, and I give you all of that. That's your choice. He could have said yes, he could have said no. Remember, Yeshua never mocks him and says, well, you can't even offer that. Apparently, he could offer those things. Otherwise, he would have just looked at him like, what's wrong with you? You can't even do that. Okay? It is 10 o'clock. Let's start wrapping it up. Norma, come up.
A few nights ago, we were talking about what happened when people die. And, well, we know that we go to the grave, other people is cremated. But my question is, if you can explain a little more what you said about the other part, our essence, go back to Yahweh.
I only answer those questions on Tuesdays between 9 a.m. and 9:15. We're not going to try to sneak out the teaching I'm not ready to do.
Okay.
Next question.
Next question. It's about the same.
She's determined, though. I give her credit.
Okay, the next question. Same subject.
Go. Same answer. Next. Told you I could play this game. Go ahead.
Okay. My question is, because this is a discussion that I had with my son, and what about when somebody is still alive, but they lose their essence, like Alzheimer, dementia? What happened in that situation that they are kind of unconscious or like a baby again?
Okay. And I'm going to answer your other question too, possibly. There's something good. Look, we really don't know. Is the answer to most of those questions. We are forced to make some sort of a educated to semi-educated guess. We don't know. My speculation is that essence that doesn't just die in the ground, okay, the physical body and all the stuff that just goes ahead and there's nothing there, that there's got to be some methodology that the Father has to maintain you in some way. The essence of your personality, your memories, all that stuff has to be stored in some way. Otherwise, how do you put it in a body? Otherwise, what was the whole point of living this whole life? Just to not be you later. If the you that was here dies and there's nothing more of it, then this whole thing was a waste. But we're expecting to be resurrected and be ourselves. Amen? So, everything after that is pure speculation. And the teaching that if I go ahead and do this teaching ever is not going to change that, okay? Almost everything to do with eschatology and end times and beyond that is all us making hopefully reasonably educated guesses. Okay, that's first answer. Second answer is the stuff like what happens in this situation, that situation, again, we'd only have to guess. So it's the same answer, but just so you know, if someone has Alzheimer's, or what happens if they end up with a brain injury, or what happens if they're this or that, that's all in his hands. We trust, this is where we just have to go to trusting. We trust him. So I don't have a problem saying, I don't know, I just trust him. That's a good answer for you to have for almost everything. I don't know, I just trust him. Why are you keeping the Sabbath? I don't know, I just trust him. How many family members give you, why don't you eat pork? I don't know, I just trust him. He said not to do it, I trust him, so I'm not doing it. He said to keep the Sabbath, I trust him, so I'm doing it. I mean, that seems to be a reasonable answer for almost anything. I don't know, I just trust him. He said it, I trust him, so I'm doing it. I believe him. I believe in him and I believe him. Okay, Santi. And then we really do have to wrap this up, not because it's so late, but because I won't have anything left for tomorrow. In my throat-wise, anyway.
From the research at the School of Nutrition, there are strong reasons why we are not suitable to eat pork.
Oh, I know there's lots of reasons. That wasn't my point. Okay,
yeah.
That wasn't my
okay.
point.
Can you explain?
I was just making it flippantly saying, the easy answer is to say, I don't know, I'm just doing it because I trust him. I mean, you may be able to do the research and see there's actually really good reasons for a lot of this stuff. They've done lots of research, by the way, that human beings cannot physically handle the stress of not having a day off every 7 days. They've tried 8-day weeks, 9-day weeks, other things like that, and people did not do well. They need to have that time off, or they break down. So there's lots of research to back up a lot of it. I was just making it simple and making a joke, so don't take it too far. All right, Santi, go ahead.
In China, in most of the city in China, they don't have 1 day off. So they work 7 days.
Yeah, that's gonna break them down, and they're gonna really have a problem.
Yeah. Galatians 3, verse 10.
We definitely don't go there. I'm kidding. Galatians 3.
Verse 10.
Verse 10, okay.
It looks like contradictory, but I believe they're not. For as many as are of work of Torah are under the curse. But for it has been written, cursed is everyone who does not continue in all that has been written in the book of Torah to do them. I guess the latter part is the same as Deuteronomy 27:26. But can you explain the first part and the second part of this verse?
I'm not thinking of the answer, by the way. I'm just trying to think about, look, I think we'll have to wait until we get to do a teaching through Galatians, because we're going to have the same challenge with Galatians that we had with Hebrews and that we had with Romans, okay? And so for me to try to go back and give you the full context of this, I'm going to need to go back and unravel for you to understand why Paul is talking about this here to the Galatians. Which, by the way, he's angry as all get up. I mean, he starts off in verse 1 with, oh, you stupid Galatians, basically, you senseless, dumb Galatians. What's wrong with you? Okay? And so we have to understand what that is all about. And so what is he talking about down in verse 10 and 11? And that's where we get into some of these goofy Christianized things. So at 10 o'clock, that's not a question we'll have time to do. That's not a spin. That's not an excuse. If you've been through Hebrews with me and Romans, you know that I will, through the Ruach, go working. And when I go through those things, we can unravel this stuff in a way that clears it up simple as day. No time for that right now. So I hope you appreciate that. Thank you, though.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on live stream? No, we're good? All right. Well, that's going to conclude the Open Midrash. And I'm going to now go to my room and collapse. Okay, so let's go ahead and have somebody close us in prayer. Let's see. Hands are up. Okay, bring the mic to... Bring it over to Pete on this side.
want me to get it's on.
Avito Makeno, our Father, our King, we thank you so much for this week. We thank you so much for all the inspiration and all the needs that have been met by so many people from all over the world, both those who are present with us in the body here and those who watch on live stream. We thank you so much for MTOI. We thank you so much for the Rabbi and the Rebbitzin and the entire staff here, and hope that this week will carry us through to the next feast and beyond that in our walk. In Yeshua's name I pray, amen.
Amen. Amen. All right. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. We'll see you in the morning for the YMTI presentations.